Chapter 307. Colored Glaze and Ryudo only found out that filial piety Kenzaki was Iwasaki Reiko's fiancé when they arrived at the scene. They didn't expect that Yoshiyuki would be so generous as to sell his son to Iwasaki as a son-in-law, so they didn't have time to deal with filial piety. But just because they didn't have time to deal with filial piety, it didn't mean that they didn't have time to do something else. After all, in this engagement banquet, the bride's identity was definitely Iwasaki Reiko, so Ryudo had already asked Sensible to dig up everything about this woman, and unexpectedly found out a lot of interesting things. Iwasaki Reiko, 39 years old this year. As the eldest daughter of Iwasaki Yanasuke, she grew up in a wealthy family and was coaxed like a little princess, so her personality and hobbies were very bad. Just how bad was her personality? Usually, when she moved, she would yell at people, throw things everywhere, and she even liked to grab a bunch of strong men to whip them, drop candles, and sit on the strong men as stools. To put it simply, Iwasaki Reiko was a pervert, almost as perverted as Lin Hana, but her appearance and temperament were not even 1% of Lin Hana's, and her personality was even worse, the kind that made people unable to like her at all. Hee hee. So this is my fiancé, how should I treat him when I go back tonight? Hiss, with a newly ordered whip? On the second floor of the Iwasaki mansion, Reiko looked at the pale fiancé standing next to her, unconsciously licked her lips, and then threw a coquettish glance at filial piety. What the F*** CK, after being winked at by his fiancé, filial piety only felt his stomach churning, and he almost vomited on the ground in front of his father-in-law and the guests below. What was even more terrifying was that when the couple stood together on the stage, a large projection screen slid down from the wall behind them. It began to play the love memoirs of the two people from their first meeting, to their first meeting, to their first love, to their first love. However, if one was slightly knowledgeable, one would know that the scene on the screen was obviously created with special effects. Although it was the work of a professional, it was still fake, and one could see the flaws if one looked closely. Filial piety himself was dizzy watching it. After all, he clearly remembered that today was the first time he met Reiko, and the two of them didn't even speak much. So how did they create a love memoir? Public execution. For the current filial piety Kenzaki, he felt that he was being executed in an inhumane way. The most terrifying thing was that this public execution had just started. The actual execution was the actual execution, after Sensible started. At the same time, just as the screen began to play the love memoirs of the two, Sensible, who was in a house not far away, smiled sinisterly as he pressed the buttons on the rows of computers and special devices in front of him, transmitting the signal. Asterisk whoosh. Asterisk the next moment, the scene on the screen changed. Originally, Koyuki Kenzaki and Reiko Iwasaki's sweet love story was playing on the screen. However, the screen suddenly flashed as a different video appeared on it. The moment they saw the video, everyone except for Ryudo and Colored Glaze were stunned. This was because an extremely exaggerated scene was currently being displayed on the huge projection screen. It was a scene of several strong and muscular men kneeling on the ground one after another as they were violently whipped by an expired young miss who was wearing a skin-tight leather jacket that weighed over 200 kilograms. The most ridiculous thing was that the scion wearing a leather jacket was waving her whip while shouting, "Ha ha! Isn't this great? This is the favor that Reiko-sama has given you. Hurry up and shout." After hearing the words of Reiko-sama, the muscular men who were being whipped also shouted, "Long live Reiko-sama! Reiko-sama is awesome!" Along with the majestic and orderly shouts, the unsightly scene on the screen continued to play. Iwasaki Yanasuke, who was standing on the second floor with his back facing the screen, noticed that something was wrong. When he turned around, his face instantly turned green. What a joke, where is this? Who is standing there? This is the home of the president of the Great Nippon Bank, Golden Heron Iwasaki Yanasuke, and also his daughter's engagement ceremony. The people sitting in the hall below were all influential people in the country. But in such a solemn and grand ceremony, Iwasaki's daughter Reiko's, some of the more exciting videos? The moment Iwasaki saw the video, he couldn't help but take half a step back and almost fell to the ground. But he still hurriedly shouted at his subordinate, "Turn it off. Hurry up and turn it off." I'm sorry. I'm already turning it off. But I can't turn it off." When the subordinate in charge of controlling the screen heard the boss's words, he was sweating profusely as he typed on the keyboard in his hand. The screen was controlled by a computer not far away, but no matter how the subordinate entered the commands through the keyboard, the computer seemed to be stuck and didn't move at all. Of course, it didn't move at all. Sensible had already used hacking methods to intercept the computer's transmission signal and replaced it with the video he stole from Iwasaki Reiko's computer. For a moment, the hall was in chaos, but other than the sound on the screen and Iwasaki's roar, there was basically no other sound. If it was a normal banquet, the guests in the hall would have already started to laugh, or even take out their phones to take photos and videos. But after all, the guests this time weren't ordinary people. When they saw the disgusting scene on the screen, they were stunned for a moment. Then they tried their best to nonchalantly drink tea, as if they didn't see anything. There was no doubt that Iwasaki had been tricked this time, and it was premeditated. He had been tricked ruthlessly. At this time, Reiko was trembling in fear on the second floor. Her kimono was almost wet, and filial piety was lying on the ground next to her, being subjected to chest compressions, as if he had just taken a trip to the gates of hell. Everyone knew that today's incident would become the biggest stain in Iwasaki Yaosuke's life, and it would become a big joke in the upper-class society. Almost 10 seconds later, another staff member reacted and said, "Pull out the power. Pull out the power." Yes. Yes. Power. Finally, the group of staff members, who were so anxious that they were about to pee their pants, hurriedly pulled out the wires of the screen, and the unsightly scene finally turned black. The next moment, the huge hall was silent. The guests looked at Iwasaki Yaosuke, who couldn't even maintain the smile on his face, and they didn't know what to do. However, at this moment, a burst of crisp applause came from a corner of the hall. The applause didn't sound loud, but it was especially ear-piercing in this deathly silent hall. Who is so bold? People looked in disbelief and saw a young man wearing a white shirt embroidered with a black dragon laughing and clapping, as if he didn't take Iwasaki seriously at all. And this young man, who was so presumptuous that it left people speechless, was naturally the biggest villain here, Tong Shang-ryu. Puffed. Wonderful, wonderful. It's so wonderful. Under the dumbfounded gazes of hundreds of people, Long Do clapped his hands and laughed. This guy did it. This guy must have done it. When they saw Ryudo's unscrupulous performance, most of the people present suddenly realized why there was such a big humiliation at the engagement of Iwasaki's daughter. Iwasaki's intention to deal with the Kamiyoshi was very obvious. Now, he even found a man from the Kamiyoshi to be his son-in-law. Anyone with a discerning eye knew what he wanted to do. It was nothing more than supporting a group of people and suppressing a group of people. Then, the Kamiyoshi would become his dog. And Ryudo Kiryu swaggered in with Kamiyoshi's daughter. It was obvious that he supported the current ruler of the Kamiyoshi, so the two sides were at odds. But even so, no one expected Ryudo's actions to be so despicable. Playing this kind of video at someone else's daughter's engagement party. How could the Iwasaki family face anyone in the future? For these business and political bosses, they generally didn't do things too ruthlessly. Who knew if there would be a time when they would turn around in the future? But Ryudo obviously didn't have this concept. If he said F*CK your family, then he meant it. Tong Shang. Ryudo. Seeing him laughing unscrupulously at his daughter's engagement party, and laughing because of this kid, Iwasaki Yaosuke couldn't hold it in anymore. He stood at the front of the stage on the second floor angrily, glared at Ryudo, and shouted, "Be *starred. The rule of the underworld is not to implicate family members. How dare you cause trouble at my daughter's engagement party?" After hearing Iwasaki's words, Ryudo laughed even more happily. He even turned to Colored Glaze and said with a smile, "Is this old guy stupid? His daughter is having an S&M convention outside. What does this have to do with me?" Don't tell me I taught him? That's right. Azurite also smiled elegantly and said in front of so many people, Old Master Iwasaki, instead of saying that someone is messing with you behind your back, it's better to say that you didn't teach your daughter well. Otherwise, how could someone fabricate this video out of thin air? Oh, this be *starred woman. A mere daughter of Ruehue dares to talk to me like this? After being rebuked by Azurite, Iwasaki's face couldn't help but turn red. It was clear that he could accept the provocation of an extreme boss like Ryudo, but he couldn't accept Kanzaki Azurite's provocation even more. After all, Colored Glaze was Ruehue's daughter, and Ruehue was Iwasaki's subordinate. How could a subordinate's daughter dare to provoke her superior? How could this be? It's fake. That video just now was fake. But Iwasaki was someone who had been through a lot, and he quickly found a way to counterattack. He hurriedly shouted to the guests, that video just now was a fake video made by someone with a mind of their own using some technical means. I, Iwasaki Yanasuk, swear that I will definitely find the culprit who made this fake video. I will bring him to justice. Originally, with Iwasaki's identity as Golden Heron, if he said that the video was fake, apart from Ryudo and Colored Glaze, everyone else would only agree, and this matter could be considered to have come to an end. After all, it wasn't difficult to make fake pictures and videos in this day and age. As long as one didn't look too deeply into it, many of them would look quite similar. However, at this moment, Ryudo raised his phone and laughed. Don't worry, Mr. Iwasaki. I just recorded that scene and posted it online. You don't have to look for the culprit. The netizens will help you find him. Ha 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 ha. Damn it, Ryudo Kiryu, aren't you too despicable? The moment they heard this, almost everyone had the same thought in their minds. Chapter 308. Looking at the phone in Ryudo's hand that was obviously recording and had already uploaded the video, almost everyone felt a chill in their hearts. Especially Iwasaki Yaosuk, who was standing on the high platform. He felt completely dumbfounded. How could there be such a person in the world? This is too shameless, too obscene, too hooligan too. Because he wanted to scold Ryudo too much, Iwasaki felt that his vocabulary seemed to be a little lacking. Suddenly, Kamishiro Yoshiyuki, who was sitting next to Ryudo, couldn't help but ask with his mouth wide open, You uploaded the video just now to the internet? Yeah, and it was uploaded by dozens of domestic and foreign websites at the same time. I'm afraid even God can't take it back. Speaking of this, Ryudo couldn't help but smile and patted Yoshiyuki's head and said with a smile, Brother, your son's cuckold will soon be known by the world. I suggest you quickly change his name. Ugh. In an instant, Yoshiyuki trembled with anger. After pointing at Ryudo with a trembling hand, he couldn't help but faint on the spot. Thump. Although Yoshiyuki fell to the ground, no one in the surrounding hall seemed to care about him, because everyone was shocked by Ryudo's actions. Even if they knew in advance that Ryudo and Colored Glaze came here with the intention of falling out with Iwasaki, they didn't expect them to be so ruthless. This combination of punches really made Iwasaki dizzy, and it also made the bystanders dizzy. Collecting dirt on someone else's daughter, hacking into someone else's computer at their daughter's engagement party, and even recording the various embarrassing moments of Iwasaki's family and uploading them to the internet. Was this something a human would do? What kind of environment was the internet? That was the real sea of stars. No matter what kind of video it was, as long as it was uploaded to the internet, it would never be cleaned up. Not to mention a mere golden heron. Even if the entire Yatsuki Crow went bankrupt, they still wouldn't be able to do it. This was not something that humans could do. Great, now it's over. Some of the people present reacted quickly. They even picked up their phones and quickly searched for some of the more popular forums. Sure enough, a post titled Rich Young Miss Likes Fierce Men, publicly exposed her ugly behavior during her engagement banquet, had already appeared on those forums, along with a video. Moreover, many netizens began to comment crazily after reading it. What kind of rich young lady is this? You look like a pig, but you like to play with whips? What a strong taste. Ha ha. But it's too tragic that it was broadcasted at the engagement ceremony. Her husband was so angry that he fell to the ground. Wait, isn't that old man Iwasaki Yamasuk? Iwasaki Yamasuk? The CEO of the great Japanese bank. One of the top 10 richest men in Japan? Really? Sigh. It seems to be true. The young lady of the Iwasaki family looks like this. Aren't there photos online? Netizens were creatures that were most passionate about all kinds of new and interesting gossip. Especially this kind of gossip that happened in a rich family, and it was very exciting. It would greatly arouse the netizens' desire to comment and spread it. After all, the Iwasaki family was a famous family in Japan. Iwasaki Yamasuk and Iwasaki Reiko were also characters who often appeared on TV and in news reports. It was not difficult to find their identity information and make comparisons. Therefore, in just a few minutes, the enthusiastic netizens dug out all the identities of the protagonists in the video, and then crazily spread the video to their friends, friends of friends, and friends of friends of friends at this speed. In less than an hour, the entire Tokyo and even the entire Japan should know that the CEO of the great Japanese bank was exposed at the engagement banquet. In other words, Iwasaki Yamasuk, Iwasaki Reiko, and her cuckolded husband, filial piety Kenzaki, instantly became popular on the internet. The dignified top tycoon in Japan, who had dominated the business world for decades, suddenly became a monkey and was watched by all the netizens in Japan. The current situation on the internet was really exciting. As for Iwasaki Yamasuk, who was at home and had already thought about how all of this would quickly develop, he took a deep breath, then picked up the microphone next to him. "Distinguished guests, I'm very sorry," Iwasaki first said, then did a very shocking action in front of everyone. He slowly lowered his body, then knelt down in front of the guests below and kowtowed deeply to the ground. When he realized that his godly bow might not be able to handle this situation, Iwasaki used his final trump card, kneeling. But it had to be said that with his identity as the Golden Heron kneeling down in front of guests of lower status, it was still very powerful. Lord Iwasaki? He actually knelt down in front of us in this kind of situation? When they saw his short white hair, most of the guests, who were secretly canceling, were also shocked by this extremely solemn action. After kneeling for a few seconds, Iwasaki raised his head slightly and said to the microphone handed over by his subordinate, "I'm just an ordinary father, poor parents. I'm sure everyone here is the same, right? Regarding the misfortune of my daughter's family, I hope everyone can be magnanimous. Please don't mention it again." Very good, it's recorded. At this time, Iwasaki was kneeling on the ground and speaking in an almost begging tone, while he secretly looked at his subordinate who was recording. As a veteran in the business world, Iwasaki knew how to deal with this kind of crisis. First apologize, second bow, third kneel. This was the most common and most effective method. For the majority of Japanese, they didn't have the idea of paying the price for doing something wrong. They just wanted to see a group of people who were usually high and mighty lower their heads, bow, and kowtow to a group of lowly commoners like them. So in the past, whether it was the business world or the political world, as long as there was a problem, they would bow, and if there was a big problem, they would kowtow. Usually, after bowing and kowtowing, no one would pursue the matter. Anyway, the Japanese were this short-sighted. They didn't want to solve the problem. They only wanted to see a group of high and mighty people apologize with snot and tears. Then they would be satisfied. As for whether the problem was solved or not, it wasn't important. What was important was that the people were happy. Therefore, the current Iwasaki grasped this point, grasped the Japanese's unique gene of valuing small gifts but not righteousness, and used this trump card of kneeling. Quick, look, quick. I, the CEO of the great Japanese bank, knelt down, even if my daughter was involved in S&M, whipped people, and was suddenly exposed at the engagement ceremony. You should forget about it. There's no need to mention it again. Originally, for Iwasaki and the great Japanese bank, this was undoubtedly a super shameful incident, the kind that might even cause him to step down directly. But after kneeling down and posting the video on the internet, not only did I not need to step down, I even gained the image of a pitiful father. And with some packaging on the internet, wouldn't I be able to take off directly? When he kowtowed again and knelt down for the second time, the corners of Iwasaki's mouth, which was almost stuck to the ground, had already curled up. It was as if he could already see the scene of his whitewashing of the misfortune of a rich CEO, the pitiful father washing his face with tears rapidly spreading across the country. To be able to turn a fatal blow of humiliation into a helping hand, Iwasaki Yanosuk's position as the Golden Heron wasn't without reason. His brain worked fast, and his skin was thick enough. When the old man said these sentimental words and kowtowed to the guests again, the guests below quickly found a direction to echo. Lord Iwasaki, raise your head. This isn't your fault. That's right. What's wrong with a young lady having some special hobbies before getting married? It's normal. It would be better to say that the problem lies with those people who purposely chose to cause trouble during other people's wedding ceremonies. That's too despicable. For a moment, the guests began to comfort Iwasaki, and some people even began to ridicule Ryudo, who was also in the center of public opinion. After hearing the gossip, Colored Glaze smiled and said, "Oh, isn't he quite capable?" He turned the tables in an instant. Indeed, his skin is so thick, no wonder he can be in a high position in this country. Longdo couldn't help but want to clap a few more times when he saw the old man's quick reaction. He praised the old man's thick skin, which even internal force might not be able to penetrate. After all, the old man's skin had probably been tempered into steel. However, after Iwasaki's response, the momentum that was disadvantageous to him had dissipated by quite a bit. Many of the guests had also slowly left. Longdo and Azurite were also led by the attendants to the third floor of the mansion. There were 11 other men and women of different identities who came with them to the balcony on the third floor. From the looks of it, Ryudo's second father-in-law, Tsukujiri Kyoji, who was very familiar with him. This should be the current Dark Crow group. Originally, there were 12 people in the middle class of Yatsuki, but because Rue Hui said she was sick and didn't come, there were only 11 people left, including Kyoji. When he saw Ryudo, Kyoji obviously couldn't help but clench his teeth slightly. Obviously, he was still somewhat resentful of this future son-in-law. After realizing this, Colored Glaze couldn't help but laugh. It seems that your future father-in-law doesn't like you, he. It's okay. My future wife likes me anyway. The one who wants to be with me is not him, but Yunyen. After being bitten by Ryudo like this, Colored Glaze couldn't help but groan, feeling like she was hit in the head with a stick. However, as the two of them chatted and laughed, it didn't take long for everyone to pass through a corridor with all kinds of infrared scanning, metal detection, facial recognition, and other security devices. Then a particularly heavy door on the third floor of the Iwasaki mansion slowly opened, welcoming the group of Dark Crows inside. This also indicated that after the small skirmish just now, the real battle was about to begin. Chapter 309. However, behind the heavy door, there was a rather spacious, circular hall. In the middle of the hall, there was a huge circular hollow table, and in the middle of the round table, there was a referee's table that was obviously of a higher level. Not only that, but at the 12 corners of the round table, which were the 12 o'clock positions, there were many chairs, and there was a green button and a red button in front of the table. The green and red buttons obviously represented support and oppose. On the side of the button, there was a tall screen that prevented others from seeing which side the person who pressed the button had chosen. Just by looking at this special configuration, it was obvious that this thing was most likely used for voting. After all, voting was often required in various meetings, including this one. The Yatsuki meeting was usually started by 1 or more Golden Herons and 8 or more Dark Crows. For a meeting where all 12 Dark Crows were present, it was usually to discuss some relatively important matters, such as this Kamiyoshi incident. When all 12 Dark Crows were seated, Colored Glaze also sat in Kaneshiro Rui's seat, while Ryudo stood behind her. Good Lord, you didn't prepare a seat for me? Yatsuki, you're so poor. Looking at the round table in front of him, and the host Golden Heron Iwasaki Yanosuk, who was sitting in the middle of the round table like a referee seat, Ryudo couldn't help but show a mocking smile. Colored Glaze smiled and said, "Bear with it, anyway it'll be over soon." "Humph, at least you know your place." After hearing the conversation between the two, Iwasaki Yanasuk sneered and said, "Since everyone is here, let's start today's topic. I'm sure everyone already knows what we're going to discuss today, and that is, it's about me and the Kamiyoshi, right?" Before Iwasaki finished speaking, Colored Glaze, who was sitting in the Kamiyoshi seat, interrupted him and said in advance. Although everyone present knew about this topic, judging from Colored Glaze's current attitude, she didn't seem to care about this topic at all. Is this kid crazy? Does she think that I and the other 11 Dark Crows can't deal with them? After hearing Colored Glaze's confident words, Iwasaki Yanasuk sneered, then said to everyone, "The Kamiyoshi has always been proud of the excellent tradition of the Zaiwang. The successor of the Zaiwang must be a pure and flawless girl, but it seems that someone doesn't care about this excellent tradition." Before he could finish his sentence, everyone at the table turned to look at Luli, who was sitting in her seat, and then looked at Long Do, who was standing behind her. After Iwasaki Yanasuk finished speaking, he took out a lot of deliberately enlarged photos from the document bag on the table and raised them one by one for all the Dark Crows members to take a look. In those photos, there were only 2 people, namely Ryudo and Colored Glaze. Judging from the background and movements, they were basically secretly photographed in school. When they were secretly photographed, the two were either holding hands, standing on each other's shoulders, or leaning intimately against each other. In fact, Colored Glaze and Ryudo usually didn't avoid each other in school. As long as one had the intention, it wasn't difficult to secretly take photos of the two of them. It could even be said that it was very simple, so the two of them weren't surprised at all by these photos. After the photos were made public, Iwasaki continued to add, according to the excellent tradition of the Kamiyoshi, the Zaiwang candidates of each generation will deliberately keep a distance from men. So it's impossible for such a shameless thing to happen. So, Colored Glaze raised her eyebrows, but she didn't have much of a reaction. So I have reason to suspect that this generation's main god, Dairuehue, is not governing properly, especially when it comes to the discipline of the next Zaiwang. She should retreat behind the scenes and let someone with the ability to govern take over. At this point, Iwasaki looked at the Kamiyoshi Ryuhue sign in front of Colored Glaze, and then looked at Ryudo, who was standing behind Ryuhue. A fierce expression appeared in his eyes. Before this, Iwasaki only wanted to suppress and control the Kamiyoshi, because Ryuhue was controlling the Black Hand Alliance behind the scenes. It was purely out of consideration for benefits. However, after Ryudo obviously played such a trick on them, and almost destroyed the reputation that Iwasaki's name had accumulated over the years, it wasn't just a matter of consideration for benefits between the two sides. Iwasaki's personal grudge was also mixed in. Ryudo Kiryu, just you wait. When Kamiyoshi Ryuhue and her daughter's authority is stripped away and there's no one left to protect you, this old man will work with the Yatsuki to wipe out your Black Hand Alliance completely. When Iwasaki thought of how this bastard Kudo would die without a burial place, his lips curled up in a sinister arc, and the fake smile on his face became even brighter. At this moment, the president of the Tsukujiri group, Tsukujiri Kyoji, who was sitting beside him, pushed up his glasses and placed his hands on the table to support his chin. Then he asked in a serious tone, "Lord Iwasaki, are you proposing to remove Kamiyoshi from power?" In the Yatsuki structure, the Golden Heron was the highest structure. They had the right to propose any proposal, and they could even request for the removal of the Dark Crow leader. However, a proposal was just a proposal. Even the Golden Heron couldn't decide everything with one hand. Otherwise, what would be the Dark Crows for? According to the rules, when the Golden Heron proposed a proposal, the Dark Crows would need to vote. 2/3 of the Dark Crows would approve the proposal. This was one of the Dark Crow's powers. That's right. After hearing Kyoji's words, Iwasaki Yanasuk slammed the table and said in a serious tone, "Saiwang is one of the most important members of the Yatsuki. If something happens to Saiwang, it will severely affect the reputation of the Yatsuki. This is a serious matter." Huffed. Suddenly, Ryudo couldn't help but laugh. "Just say it. Just say that you don't like me and Lady Ruehue, and you want to kill us. You are indeed one of the main reasons. You're just an extreme hooligan, yet you actually want to use the Kanzaki family as a springboard to enter the upper class. You don't know what you're talking about. We will never allow such a thing to happen. Iwasaki Yanosuk had a mocking smile on his face, and he pointed at the hooligan. From the beginning to the end, Iwasaki's impression of Ryudo was that he was a piece of trash trying to enter the upper class by hooking up with the Kamiyoshi lady. The reason why Kanzaki and Colored Glaze were together with Ryudo Kiryu was because they each wanted what they needed. The Colored Glaze and her daughter needed the Black Hand Alliance, and Ryudo needed the Kamiyoshi clan support. But when faced with Iwasaki's responsibility, Ryudo paused for a moment. Then he couldn't help but laugh out loud. Buffed, stuffed. His laughter sounded very heroic, but if one listened carefully, one could feel a strong sense of mockery. This made Iwasaki's face darken. You still dare to laugh at a time like this? You'll know how you're going to die in a moment. After taking a deep breath, Iwasaki said to the 11 Raven members around him, "Everyone, we can start the voting now. Those who agree with the dismissal of Kanzaki Rui, please press the green button. Those who disagree, please press the red button." 11 Raven members. If more than 2/3 of them agreed, 8 of them would be in favor of the decision. Iwasaki was very confident in this vote. After all, he was the Golden Heron. In the Yatsuki system, although the Golden Heron was only responsible for proposing the motion, and the Raven was responsible for voting, this so-called voting was just a formality most of the time. It should be known that in the past, more than 90% of the motions proposed by the Golden Heron passed safely. After all, the Golden Heron was actually the Raven's superior. Unless it was something related to their interests, the Raven would usually not vote against the motion. And this time, because the motion involved the Kamiyoshi, Colored Glaze naturally wouldn't participate in the voting. After Iwasaki finished speaking, the other 11 people almost didn't hesitate to reach their hands into the voting machine that was surrounded by obstructions. The buttons couldn't be seen, and they pressed the buttons. When everyone pressed the buttons, the results would be transmitted to the electronic panel around the host seat in the middle, so that everyone could see the voting results clearly. 3, 2, 1. Beep. Finally, accompanied by a crisp electronic sound, the voting results that Iwasaki Yanosuk had been waiting for were displayed. According to Iwasaki's knowledge, the only person who could possibly vote against the motion was Tsukujiri Kyoji. This Tsukujiri Group CEO had a good relationship with Kanzaki Rui, and his wife seemed to be best friends with Kanzaki Rui. It wasn't strange for him to oppose the removal of Kanzaki Rui's power. However, the other 10 people only had some business dealings with the Kanzaki family. Some of them didn't even have any dealings with the Kanzaki family. It was basically impossible for them to take the risk of offending the Golden Heron by voting against the Kanzaki family. However, the results displayed on the electronic panel surprised Iwasaki a little, because after the electronic screen flashed, the result displayed was 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock, which meant that all the 11 Ravens present chose to press the same button, including Tsukujiri Kyoji. Oh, I didn't expect that guy to be so sensible. He didn't risk condemnation and vote for Rui, but that's what a smart guy is. Thinking of this, Iwasaki Yanosuk nodded slightly. But the moment he nodded, he saw all the contents on the electronic screen. Then, the old man in his 70s was dumbfounded. The votes were 11 o'clock. Iwasaki didn't see it wrong. But what he didn't see at first glance was that the 11 votes on the electronic screen were actually flashing red dots. In other words, the votes cast by the Ravens this time were all against Iwasaki Yanosuk's motion. Chapter 310. The moment he saw the final result, the smile on Iwasaki Yanosuk's face instantly collapsed, and his body trembled unconsciously. Yes, trembling. This old man who worked hard in the business world for his entire life and finally reached the highest position among businessmen, Yatsuki Kaneki, couldn't control his emotions for a moment. His pair of slightly cloudy pupils suddenly widened as he stared at the 11 o'clock on the electronic screen. It was as if he saw the scene of the end of the world. How is this possible? Are my eyes playing tricks on me? No, did the machine malfunction? If it's possible, I should immediately ask someone to check the machine. And then just as Iwasaki was about to ask someone to check the machine, the scene that he suddenly saw sent a chill down his spine. When Iwasaki, who was in the middle of the host seat, raised his head, Iwasaki was met with a lot of strange gazes. Starting from Kyoji in Tsukuderi, they turned clockwise all the way to the left. Some people's gazes became evasive, while the other half's gazes were somewhat cold. As for the most important people, Colored Glaze and Ryudo, one had a calm expression, while the other had a strange smile on his face. They didn't have a trace of surprise from such a large disparity in the score. I fell into their trap. They planned this beforehand. After noticing such an abnormal state, Iwasaki immediately understood in his heart. A score of 11 o'clock rarely appeared under normal circumstances, because it was rare for all 11 people to agree. After all, the members of Raven came from all walks of life, and they had different standpoints. Therefore, there was no requirement that the motion must be passed by all members. Instead, they chose a system where 2/3 of the members agreed. However, this time, when it came to the voting motion of the Kamiyoshi, everyone's attitude was the same. They all opposed the removal of Kaneki Ruehue from the position of the leader. In other words, they all stood on the opposite side of Iwasaki, who proposed the motion. There was only one reason for this situation, and that was that the Kamiyoshi and the Black Hand Alliance, these two huge forces, did something behind the scenes. A mistake, a huge mistake. The moment he thought of this, Iwasaki suddenly realized where he made a mistake. On one hand, he underestimated the abilities of Ruehue, Colored Glaze, and Ryudo. On the other hand, he shouldn't have given them 3 days to prepare. That's right, these 3 days were crucial. If it wasn't for these 3 days, this vote wouldn't have such a shocking result. Just as Iwasaki thought, in these 3 days, Ruehue, Colored Glaze, and Ryudo used different methods to secretly establish relationships with the other Raven members, and had already predicted the result of this vote. Among the 12 Dark Crows, Ruehue had a good relationship with 2 other Dark Crows, other than Kyoji. After some negotiations, she obtained 2 no votes at the cost of providing some help in the form of connections. Not to mention Kyoji himself, since his daughter Yin and Ryudo came back from Paris together. Anyone who wasn't an idiot could see that the two had already had sex. Kyoji only had 1 daughter, so what else could he say? In desperation, Kyoji could only agree with Ryudo, this bastard son-in-law. Therefore, needless to say, he also used his connections to persuade another Raven member to help vote against the proposal. In addition to Kyoji, Ryudo's other father-in-law, Saito Takahiro, also helped a lot. Although Saito Dojo wasn't a member of the Yatsuki Crow organization, they had a lot of connections with the upper class. Therefore, with Takahiro's help, Saito Dojo also persuaded another Raven member to help vote against the proposal. That was a total of 5 votes. With these 5 votes, Iwasaki's proposal could be said to be completely useless, because it was impossible for him to gather 2/3 of the votes to pass the proposal. But it wasn't enough. It was far from enough. After obtaining 5 of the votes, Longdo and Lioli were still moving in the dark in order to obtain the remaining 6 votes as well. To reject the proposal, there was no difference between 5 votes and 11 votes, but there was a big difference on a deeper level. If it was just 5 votes, it would show that Iwasaki's influence was still there, and there were still 6 Ravens willing to follow his footsteps. This wasn't the result that Colored Glaze wanted. Ever since that Golden Heron was ready to attack the Kenzaki family, the only thing Lioli wanted to achieve was to make Iwasaki Yanasuke disappear completely, making him disappear along with his huge influence. In order to completely destroy Iwasaki's influence, the process of obtaining the next 6 votes was more or less shady. 2 of the 6 votes were obtained with the help of Sensible and Gal Yuan. The 2 of them had targeted one of the Raven individuals and companies and obtained some criminal evidence of their individual or company. From there, they threatened them. If they voted against the Kamiyoshi in the next proposal, then they should wash their butts and prepare to go to jail. After obtaining the evidence, that was how Colored Glaze threatened them. As long as the evidence was made public, even Iwasaki and Yatsuki wouldn't be able to protect them. After all, under the influence of someone with ulterior motives, this kind of criminal evidence would spread like wildfire across the country, and it would be impossible to extinguish it. After this threat, 2 votes were naturally obtained. As for the remaining 4 votes, the Dark Crows did not have any similar evidence to use. Thus, they could only resort to more violent methods. Before this meeting started, Ryudo arranged for the Rulong Security Company's elite Dragonfang squad to kidnap the parents, wives, and children of the 4 ravens as much as possible, and use them as a threat against the 4 ravens. The kidnapping process sounded simple, but there was a lot of undercurrents. However, thanks to the elite strength of the Dragonfang squad, they succeeded in achieving their goal in the end. A threat. This was even more of a threat, and it was the most despicable kind of threat to use one's family. But even so, Colored Glaze didn't hesitate at all when arranging this. In order to obtain the final victory, she was willing to do anything. Since their families were in the hands of others, the remaining 4 ravens had nothing to say and were forced to vote against the proposal. After all, Iwasaki only wanted to take action against the Kenzaki family. Essentially, it had nothing to do with him. He couldn't possibly sacrifice his family's life just to take down someone who had nothing to do with him. That would be far too foolish. By the time the last 4 ravens changed sides, the votes of the 11 ravens were all in the hands of Colored Glaze. Thus, the ridiculous everyone changed sides scene just now happened. That's it. That's the result I wanted. Seeing the golden heron standing in the middle of the round table with her eyes wide open in shock, Colored Glaze, who was sitting in her seat like an empress, asked calmly, "Iwasaki-sama, can you announce the result of the proposal?" Kenzaki Colored Glaze. You. Seeing Colored Glaze acting as if she was the master of this place and didn't care about him at all, Iwasaki knew that he had completely lost this battle and couldn't help but point his finger at her. Ugh. But in the next moment, Iwasaki couldn't help but cover his heart with his hand. At the same time, he felt as if he couldn't breathe properly. No matter how good Iwasaki's treatment was, he was only an old man in his 70s, so it was natural for his body to have some problems. Now that he was faced with such a tragic situation of everyone betraying him, and after being angered by a junior like Colored Glaze, he almost fainted on the spot. He could only support himself with his hand on the table and barely maintain his high and mighty posture. But even so, it was his duty to announce the result. So Iwasaki Yanasuke could only clench his chest and gnash his teeth as he said, "This motion is not passed. The meeting is over. Dismissed." In the end, after holding his breath and saying dismissed, Iwasaki hurriedly opened a small door next to the round table and quickly left the conference room. It was as if he would die from anger if he looked at Colored Glaze and Ryudo's expressions. Just like that, the meeting that was supposed to send Rue Hui and her daughter to hell ended with a weak ending, and it ended with the Golden Heron being defeated. For Iwasaki, this battle could be said to be a complete loss for him, and it might even become a nightmare that repeatedly appeared in the dreams of the president of the Great Nippon Bank. After the meeting ended, the 4 Dark Crows, who were threatened, also hurriedly found Ryudo. One of them said to him with a somewhat gloomy face, "Boss Tong Sheng, now that we have voted, can you release our families?" "Of course, I promise no one will hurt a single hair on their heads." Ryudo took out his phone on the spot, clicked on the call, and said, "Send everyone back, respectfully. Remember, be polite." After knowing that their families were fine, the 4 Dark Crows finally breathed a sigh of relief. They quickly followed Iwasaki's footsteps and left, as if they wanted to give some explanation to the Golden Heron. "Is this okay? Although you won this meeting, you also offended a lot of people." Looking at the backs of the 4 Dark Crows, Gong Si, who came to the 2, couldn't help but say, "The kidnapping and extortion method that Luli used this time could only be used once at most. If the next meeting was held, they would definitely not fall for it so easily. Moreover, the favor card that they had played previously might not be fully effective. In other words, as long as Iwasaki still held the position of Golden Heron, then he could make a comeback at any time and launch attacks on the Kamiyoshi from all directions. No problem. Iwasaki won't be around for long. You should prepare yourself, the next Golden Heron, Sama. Ryudo reached out and patted his father-in-law's shoulder and gave him a handsome thumbs up. Chapter 3:11. WH, what? Iwasaki won't be around for long? And the next Golden Heron? Me? The moment he heard this sentence, Tsukudori Kyoji was stunned. But he was a smart person, so he reacted a few seconds later and said in a low voice, "You plan to kill Iwasaki? You want me to replace him as the Golden Heron?" "Of course." Colored Glaze nodded and said coldly, "If we don't remove the root of the problem, it will grow again. Since we've already broken all pretenses, let's just do it to the end. Either do it or do it to the end." This was Colored Glaze's current style of doing things. It could be said that 3 days ago in that small restaurant, when she found out that Iwasaki wanted to deal with her mother, she had already made up her mind to get rid of that Golden Heron, and all her subsequent plans revolved around this. Iwasaki Yanasuke had to die. His death wasn't just because she didn't want to leave an enemy alive. It was also a warning to the entire Yatsuki organization and the other 2 Golden Herons. Just think about it. Iwasaki had just decided to deal with the Kenzaki family, and then he was defeated in the voting with an overwhelming 11-0 vote. Not only that, he had even disappeared in the blink of an eye. How terrifying would that be? After all this, whether it was the other 10 Dark Crows or the 2 Golden Herons, they should have a better understanding of the triangle formed by the Kamiyoshi, Black Hand Alliance, and Tsukudori Corporation. The connections of the Kamiyoshi, the wealth of the Tsukudori Corporation, the violence of the Black Hand Alliance. After the 3 of them worked together, what they could do was far beyond everyone's expectations. Even killing a Golden Heron would be a piece of cake. And the last step of this plan was to let Tsukudori Kyoji replace Iwasaki as the Golden Heron after his death. As the CEO of the Tsukudori Corporation, Kyoji was one of the 10 richest people in the country. He had an important position in the business world, and even in the Dark Crows, he was a very outstanding member. Kyoji had the qualifications to become the next Golden Heron, especially after receiving the full support of the Kamiyoshi and Black Hand Alliance. If Tsukudori Kyoji could become the Golden Heron, then for Ryudo and the others, the Yatsuki situation would be completely stabilized. With him in the Golden Heron and Rue Hui in the Dark Crows, this organization would no longer be a threat to Ryudo them. They might even be controlled by them. Of course, all of this began with Iwasaki Yanasuke's perfect curtain call. Not long after, the Golden Heron, the Yatsuki Eskama Ayatsuki, under the bombardment of the large group of reporters outside, cars left the Iwasaki mansion and returned to their daily lives. Among them, Ryudo and Colored Glaze's Golden Dragon Spins the Sky black car was deliberately driven very slowly, so that the reporters inside could clearly see and take photos of the 2 sitting together. Although they knew that Kenzaki and Colored Glaze and Ryudo Kiryu were classmates at Doichi Daiichi High School, seeing them appear in this kind of situation at the same time and in the same car was very newsworthy. Kujiri. Click. So the reporters quickly took photos of the 2 sitting in the car, faithfully recording the scene of Ryudo and Colored Glaze leaving the Iwasaki mansion. Of course, they didn't notice that the face of Ryudo sitting in the back seat was a bit stiff, as if he couldn't make a normal expression. In fact, this was indeed the case. The current Ryudo couldn't make a very rich expression, because after the 2 returned to the Rulon Group headquarters, Ryudo, in the room, took off the special mask connected to his face, revealing the familiar face of dancing costume. Phew, this mask is really hot. I used to be afraid of wearing this when I was training. Dancing Dress couldn't help but complain when she took off the character disguise mask that she had meticulously made. Thank you for your hard work. Quickly wipe your face. Look at your sweaty face. Huh? Is that so? I'll go right away. After being reminded by Milady, Dancing Costume quickly ran to the bathroom next door to wash his face, while Colored Glaze turned her head and looked in the direction of the Iwasaki mansion that the two just came out of not long ago. Ryudo should be almost done. Farewell, Iwasaki Yanasuke. When looking in that direction, Colored Glaze couldn't help but think of Iwasaki's fake smile, and at the same time, she secretly thought so in her heart. Indeed, the Ryudo who came back with Colored Glaze in public was disguised by Dancing Costume. Then where was the real Ryudo? The answer was self-evident. Just when Colored Glaze and Dancing Costume returned to the Rulon Group headquarters, in the Iwasaki mansion, Iwasaki Yanasuke, who had just suffered a big loss, was lying on the bed, and the private doctor and nurse next to him were helping him to breathe oxygen. Huff, hiss, huff. After continuously breathing for a few minutes, the suffocating feeling in Iwasaki's chest barely recovered a little, and his breathing became much smoother. Lord Iwasaki, although your body's condition is not bad, please don't be so angry. It's very dangerous for you at your age. Seeing that the boss's expression was still very bad after taking off the breathing mask, the private doctor next to him couldn't help but try to persuade him. But Iwasaki didn't even look at him, and he just waved his hand and said, "I'm fine. You can go now." Lord Iwasaki sigh. Knowing that the old man didn't intend to listen to his advice, the private doctor could only sigh and leave with the nurse, leaving the room to Iwasaki and his subordinates. After the doctor left, one of the subordinates quickly said, "Lord, the doctor is right. You should rest well. Don't think about those things." "Don't think about it. How is that possible?" Iwasaki heard this, but he shook his head and smiled bitterly. "I'm afraid that the entire Yatsuki is laughing at me now. If I don't do anything, my prestige will be trampled to the bottom, and then it's all over." As an experienced businessman who has been in the business world for a lifetime, Iwasaki knew very well the importance of prestige to him. In the end, Yatsuki was actually a loosely structured organization. Although Golden Heron was a highest superior, Golden Heron, Dark Crow, and Final Feather didn't necessarily have a direct superior-subordinate relationship. Even if he was the Prime Minister of the Inner Cabinet, some large companies would still not give him any face. Not to mention Iwasaki. As a businessman, if he didn't have any prestige, then his position as the Prime Minister of the Inner Cabinet would be meaningless. After all, Nippon was a typical strong society. People would only follow the strong and despise the weak, and this was the case from top to bottom. And as a strong person, if someone punched you, you have to return at least double the punch, otherwise you will be looked down upon, and the strong will no longer be the strong. When the strong are no longer the strong, they will be looked down upon, and when they are looked down upon, they will be attacked from all directions. People who offended before were good. People who wanted to take advantage of the situation were good. People who wanted to take advantage of the situation were also good. In short, if Iwasaki was looked down upon, everyone would swarm at this time, tear him apart, and devour his flesh and blood. So no, this matter couldn't be let go no matter what. After the humiliating defeat not long ago, even if Iwasaki was lying on the hospital bed, he still resolutely arranged many strategic missions for his subordinates. He planned to mobilize all his forces to attack the Kamiyoshi and the Black Hand Alliance. As the saying goes, a centipede dies but never falls down. Moreover, Iwasaki had just been defeated, and it wasn't time for him to die yet. At this moment, before the situation fully escalated, the connections, wealth, and influence that he had accumulated over the years as the Golden Heron were still unshaken. As long as he fought back as soon as possible, there would still be a chance for him to restore his prestige. Just after Iwasaki finished arranging the counterattack mission, one of his subordinates asked, "Boss, about the marriage between Reiko and filial piety, Kanzaki. Are we still going to hold it?" It had to be said that today's unprecedented engagement banquet was indeed so embarrassing that it would make one explode just thinking about it. Although Iwasaki managed to save some face in the end, Reiko and filial piety, Kanzaki, still became the laughingstock of Nippon. When he opened the website, basically every forum was discussing Reiko Reiko's evil fetishes and the huge scandal that was exposed during her engagement banquet. Especially after that, Iwasaki Reiko's past scandals that were caused by her bad temper, such as beating up the servants, throwing things at the stewardesses on the plane, bullying her classmates in school, and so on, were all pulled out one by one and whipped. This made Reiko's reputation even worse. Actually, this marriage was originally initiated because Iwasaki wanted to rely on Yoshiyuki and his father to take over the Kamiyoshi tribe. However, now that Rue still had a firm grasp on power, this marriage had completely lost its value. Let's not hold the wedding. Let them go get the marriage certificate early tomorrow. When this matter was mentioned, Iwasaki felt a slight headache. However, there was no turning back once the arrow was shot, so he could only hastily arrange for Reiko Reiko to marry filial piety Kanzaki and treat it as finding a son-in-law for Reiko to marry into the family. Not long after, Iwasaki had arranged everything properly, and his subordinates left one after another, allowing their boss to have a good rest in this luxurious ward. However, just as Iwasaki closed his eyes and was about to take a nap, a young, familiar voice suddenly rang out from beside his bed. "Have you finally finished handing over the funeral? Geez, you made me wait for a long time." What? The moment he heard that voice, Iwasaki thought that he was having a nightmare. However, when he quickly opened his eyes and looked to the side of the bed, he realized that a handsome face that was so annoying that it made his teeth itch had unknowingly appeared here. He was even giving him a devilish smile. Chapter 312. At that moment, Iwasaki Yanasuke really thought that he was having a nightmare. He pinched his thigh and realized that it did hurt. Only then did he realize that it was not a nightmare, but real. Tong Sheng. Ryudo. Although it was only 4 words, it was extremely difficult for Iwasaki to say. It was as if every word required all his strength. How is this possible? Why is this guy here? How did he get in? When did he get in? For a moment, Iwasaki Yanasuke's mind was filled with questions. Even so, he reached out his hand and smashed a special button beside the bed as fast as he could. As the president of the great Japanese bank, as well as the golden heron of Yatsuke, Iwasaki had encountered countless assassinations, kidnappings, and threats in his life. Naturally, he had his own way of dealing with them. As long as Iwasaki smashed the button, his bed would immediately sink down and fall from a 3rd floor to the absolute safety of the basement. It was guaranteed that his life would not be in danger. At the same time, the hundreds of bodyguards outside the mansion would swarm in. The 3 police agencies nearby would also immediately rush over in their police cars. They would not let a single criminal escape. In the past many years, this perfect safety measure had saved Iwasaki's life countless times. Unfortunately, it would not work today. Before Iwasaki smashed the button, Ryudo had already reached out his left thumb and middle finger and lightly flicked his shoulder. 2 fingers, just 2 fingers, lightly flicked. But Iwasaki, who was flicked on the shoulder, felt his right hand go numb. His entire arm drooped down rapidly, as if it was injected with an anesthetic. He could not even move a finger. But, damn it, after realizing that he could not press the emergency button quickly, Iwasaki quickly took out a pistol from under his pillow with his other hand and pulled the trigger at Ryudo's head without hesitation. Click. However, before Iwasaki could pull the trigger, a strong gust of wind swept past, and the small handgun in his hand completely disappeared. Only the handle and the trigger were left. It was as if it was a magic trick. Seeing Iwasaki's astonished expression, Ryudo couldn't help but laugh. What do you think? What other tricks do you have up your sleeve? It wasn't that Ryudo looked down on Iwasaki, but he was already strong enough to ignore most firearms. This was especially true for an ordinary old man who had not undergone much special training. It was simply impossible for him to deal with him with a pistol. In Ryudo's opinion, it was no different from a 3-year-old child stabbing someone with a toothpick. This is bad, this is bad. With Iwasaki's intelligence and understanding of the evils of society, how could he not know what Ryudo was up to when he returned and even sneaked into his bedroom? There was no doubt that Ryudo was here to kill him this time. And it wasn't an assassination, but an open one. What to do? This bastard is too strong. I have no way of escaping from him. I can't even call for help. Is this the only way? No matter what, Iwasaki definitely didn't want to die. So after thinking for a second, the president of the great Japanese bank did something that he was very familiar with. In front of the young Ryudo, Iwasaki quickly lowered his head and said, "I'm very sorry. I beg you to let me live. As long as you don't kill me, you can have anything you want." The world was bustling, and everyone came for profit. The world was bustling, and everyone went for profit. As a businessman, Iwasaki didn't believe that there was anything that couldn't be solved with money. If it couldn't be solved, then it meant that the money wasn't enough. So even if Ryudo was in his bedroom, Iwasaki still planned to pay a price in exchange for his life. And he believed that Ryudo would accept it. Oh, Ryudo heard this and laughed happily. He laughed and mocked. "Are you an idiot? Don't tell me you think that you can deal with me with money at this time? Listen to me first." Iwasaki was also a ruthless person. He proposed without hesitation. "In order to show my sincerity, I can hand over 10% of the shares of the great Japanese bank. The market value is more than $10 billion US. Is this enough money? 10% of the shares of the great Japanese bank. The market value is more than $10 billion US? It had to be said that even with Ryudo's current wealth, he couldn't help but hold his breath when he heard this number. $10 billion US. What kind of concept was this? Half a year ago, the $10 million US he had robbed from John was equivalent to 1 billion Japanese yen. This $10 billion US was 1,000 times the $10 million US, which was equivalent to 1 trillion Japanese yen. If you couldn't understand how exaggerated this amount of money was from this number alone, it was as long as 1100000000000, which was an astronomical number. Although $10 billion US of shares was not equal to $10 billion US of cash, just holding so many shares of the great Japanese bank was already a super powerful force, a force that could shake the country. Speaking of which, this 10% of the shares of the great Japanese bank could be said to be the greatest achievement of Iwasaki's life. Even excluding the shares, all his remaining assets added together may not be as valuable as these shares. It could be said to be his lifeblood in the true sense. But at this time, in order to survive, Iwasaki did not hesitate to give away his lifeblood. After all, if he lost his life, what was the use of his lifeblood? This country bumpkin must have never seen such a large amount of money. He would definitely be tempted. After seeing the slight change in Ryudo's expression, Iwasaki finally felt relieved. But in the next second, the young man smiled and shook his head. He sneered and said, $10 billion US worth of shares is indeed not bad. But compared to making a deal with you, I'd rather take your life and then slowly raid your house. At that time, I think I'll make more money. Raid my house? When he heard this, Iwasaki was shocked. He didn't think that there was such a thing as raiding in this modern society. Wasn't this too ridiculous? So he quickly shook his head and said, "Wait, I can promise you, if something happens to me, the things you get will definitely not be as valuable as these shares. At least, you won't get these shares." "Is that so? I think after killing you, I can get these shares. Anyway, the beneficiary of your assets must be your daughter, Iwasaki Reiko, right? Just start with her. She's the daughter-in-law of the Kamiyoshi clan, Hihi." Huh. The moment he heard this name, Iwasaki couldn't help but widen his eyes. Indeed, Iwasaki did not make a will, and his wife had already passed away. If he mysteriously died, all his assets would definitely go to his daughter Reiko. Coincidentally, Iwasaki Reiko's fiancé was Filial Piety Kanzaki, a member of the Kamiyoshi clan. In a situation where Iwasaki Yanosuke couldn't interfere, If Reiko and filial piety got married, it would be equivalent to joining the Kamiyoshi clan and becoming a member of their clan. At that time, when Iwasaki Yanosuke died, Reiko would naturally inherit the family business, and the Kamiyoshi clan could use all kinds of methods to rightfully harvest all of Iwasaki's assets. It wasn't easy to steal from Iwasaki, but it was different to steal from Reiko. It was like picking it up from the ground. How could this be? After understanding the meaning of Ryudo's words, Iwasaki's head drooped, as if he suddenly aged 10 years. Originally, he wanted to find someone from the Kamiyoshi clan to be his son-in-law, so that after Rue Huey's fall, he would have a legitimate, reasonable reason to annex the Kamiyoshi clan. Who knew that this plan would unexpectedly become a foreshadowing, a tool that Ryudo used instead. Thank you for publicly holding the engagement banquet between Reiko and filial piety. Thank you for giving us a legitimate, reasonable reason to annex all of your assets. You're a good person. Rest in peace. Wait. I still have something to say. Boom. Before Iwasaki could finish a sentence, Ryudo's palm landed on his heart like a bolt of lightning. With one strike, Iwasaki fell onto the bed with lifeless eyes. Although he didn't die on the spot, he wasn't far from death. After killing Iwasaki, Ryudo picked up the phone and quickly dialed Rue Huey's number. "Hello, Ryudo-kun. Are you done on your side?" After the call connected, Rue Huey's elegant and mature voice came from the other side. "Done. That old man Iwasaki will die in an hour. Now go and arrange the marriage between Reiko and filial piety." "No problem. The registration will be completed in 15 minutes. Also, how's Yoshiyuki? Perhaps he was too traumatized and has some mental problems. I've arranged for someone to take care of him for the rest of his life. You don't have to care about this person anymore." Although Rue Huey's words were very tactful, it wasn't easy to say how Yoshiyuki ended up with mental problems. Ryudo was too lazy to ask. After all, he was just a traitor. Even if he died, he wouldn't die in vain. Just like that, after settling the matter on Iwasaki's side, Ryudo quietly jumped out of the window and left Iwasaki's mansion along the path he came from. Not long after, Iwasaki's personal doctor noticed his boss's abnormal condition and hurriedly sent him to the hospital for emergency treatment. Unfortunately, due to Iwasaki's old age and the unknown condition of his heart, the hospital declared that the emergency treatment failed after an hour. The life of the Golden Heron thus came to an end. Before Iwasaki was declared dead, the marriage registration between Iwasaki Reiko and filial piety Kanzaki had been completed. This also meant that the career that Iwasaki Yaosuke had worked so hard for his entire life would soon belong to the Kamiyoshi. The Golden Heron had fallen, and the hidden dragon had soared. From this moment onwards, Ryudo, the Supreme Emperor, had truly reached the pinnacle of his life. He had become a top-notch big shot with assets in the tens of billions. Of course, it would take some time to complete this invasion. Moreover, Ryudo had other things to do that night. Or rather, the colored glaze had other things to prepare for him. Chapter 313. When Ryudo returned to the Rulong Group HQ, the sky was already completely dark. Colored Glaze was currently in his room. She was furiously writing at the familiar desk while thinking hard. She would even rub her head from time to time. Although she had received news from Ryudo that Iwasaki was dead, even if Iwasaki was dead, they still had a lot of things to do. It was far from time to rest. For example, how to push Tsukujiri Kyoji to the position of Golden Heron, how to swallow all of Iwasaki's family's assets, who should fill the vacant position of Dark Crow after Kyoji's departure, and so on. Thinking about it carefully, there were just too many problems. Especially after Iwasaki's death, the other 2 Golden Herons and 10 Dark Crows would inevitably be in danger. They had to be split up in advance before they formed a united front. Even though Lapis Lazuli now had the 3 trump cards of the Kenzaki family, Black Hand Alliance, and Tsukujiri Group, In this complicated period where undercurrents were surging, it was easy to capsize in all kinds of places if they didn't make good arrangements. Phew. After thinking for a long time, Colored Glaze couldn't help but sigh. Although she was much more resourceful than ordinary people, it was still very tiring to think so much every day. But recently, when Colored Glaze was tired from thinking, she would raise her left hand to look at the dove blood-red ring that looked like it was flowing with flames. This is an engagement ring. I actually have an engagement ring. It's quite unbelievable. For Colored Glaze, in the past year, too many things had happened. A year ago, she was just a canary living in a birdcage. She seemed to have a noble identity, but unfortunately, this identity could only lock her future deep in a shrine, becoming a noble chess piece. Just like her mother, before, and her aunt now. She didn't know when it started, but Lioli had lost her desire for love and the future. Instead, she became numb to it. Every day, she would just casually get by and forget about it. But a year ago, ever since the kidnapping incident in the warehouse that was emitting the sea breeze, Luli's life finally took a turn for the better. In just a year, a shiny engagement ring was on her finger. This was something that Lioli didn't even dare to dream about in the past. Just as Colored Glaze was staring at the ring on her finger in a daze, a pair of warm hands quietly reached out from behind and covered her clear eyes. Guess who I am? The person's voice came from behind Colored Glaze. His childish words made her want to laugh, but she still shook her head and laughed. I don't know, probably a kidnapper with bad intentions. Good fellow, you're still thinking about this even after so long. After hearing Colored Glaze's words, Ryudo curled his lips in puzzlement. He picked up the girl sitting on the chair and sat on the chair himself. Then, he put the girl's perky, but on his lap and sat down. It's been hard on you recently. At this time, Ryudo held Colored Glaze in his arms and leaned his head on her shoulder. But his eyes were looking at the large pile of folders, diaries, phones, computers, tablets, and other tools on the table in front of him. Because there were a lot of things to do recently, Colored Glaze's work was also very heavy. She even took a long leave from school and stayed in the office for many days. At this time, Colored Glaze reached out and touched Ryudo's face without turning her head, and calmly replied, "At least you still have some conscience. You still know to come and greet me. Of course, you're my virtuous wife. How can I not care about you? Virtuous wife. What about those two? Who are those two?" When Colored Glaze mentioned those two, there was a slight fluctuation in her tone. It was obvious that she still had some resentment in her heart. Usually, when Ryudo and Colored Glaze were together, they wouldn't talk about Dunya and Yunyen. After all, there were some things that were better left unsaid. There was no need to say it out loud. However, it was clear that because of the two previous trips, Lu Li's resentment had been especially obvious recently. Even though he had given her a ring first and confirmed her identity as his legal wife, she would still occasionally feel dissatisfied. After feeling Colored Glaze's dissatisfaction, Ryudo, who was hugging her, smiled and said in her ear, "Those two are my lovers, and you're my wife. There's no contradiction in this, right? Who's your wife? Shameless." Suddenly, Colored Glaze turned her face away, as if she didn't want to talk to this shameless guy anymore. That's right. Judging from the situation, after Long Do took the other two on a trip, Lioli obviously knew what the three of them were doing outside. It was nothing more than a hole-in-one thing. As for this so-called home run, a dignified, generous, and classic young lady like Colored Glaze wouldn't think about it. Probably not. Especially when Ryudo hugged her like this. Colored Glaze couldn't help but think of the other two women he hugged like this. As for those two women, Ryudo probably didn't just hug them. Maybe he did this, that, and this and that. Thinking of this, Colored Glaze couldn't help but sigh slightly. Although Colored Glaze's sigh was very light, Ryudo still felt it. As expected, Colored Glaze still had some issues with me, Yunyen, and Dunya. Fine, I still have to do this. After feeling the dissatisfaction in the girl's heart, Ryudo took a deep breath, suddenly reached out and grabbed Colored Glaze's back and legs, and carried her up in a princess carry. Sigh. Before Colored Glaze could react. Her body flew to the side of the bed and landed on the soft bed. This was Ryudo's room, so the bed was naturally Ryudo's bed. When colored glaze was placed on the bed, Ryudo took advantage of the situation and pressed her firmly under his body. "Stop fooling around, I haven't finished my work." After being suddenly pushed, colored glaze couldn't help but frown. Some things are more important than work. For example, the wedding night. Longdo, on the other hand, kissed Lu Li's cheek, then reached out and hugged the young girl's slender waist. Nuptial night? What do you mean? Colored glaze showed a puzzled expression when she heard this. After all, there was no such thing here. Naturally, Longdo wasn't stingy with explaining to this adorable young lady what a bridal chamber was and what a candlelight night was. First of all, the wedding night is the bridal room where the bride and groom sleep during the wedding. And then on the wedding night, what the two of them will do. I don't think I need to say it, Oh. After understanding Ryudo's meaning, colored glaze's pretty face flushed red. Wasn't it obvious what the bride and groom would do on the wedding night? Of course, the bride and groom would cover themselves with a quilt on the bed and discuss the origin of mankind, the development of mankind, and the future of mankind. Although colored glaze did think about this, she didn't expect Ryudo to suddenly make this kind of request, this kind of a hole-in-one-shot request. But colored glaze still hurriedly said, "Wait, didn't we say we would do it on the wedding night?" That was because we were worried about the inventory of the Kamiyoshi and the pressure of Yatsuki. Now you think these two problems are still a problem? Forget it. Then why do we have to wait until the wedding? From the beginning, colored glaze, as the next vegetarian king, had to maintain her purity, or else she would be punished by Yatsuki. Therefore, no matter how good their relationship was, they could only hug, kiss, and touch each other, and couldn't really do anything. But now it was different. The situation was different. Today, when Ryudo, colored glaze, Ruehui Kyoji, and the others worked together to kill Iwasaki, Yatsuki would enter an era where these forces could be seen with the naked eye. In this kind of situation where they could cover the sky with one hand, what was the problem of vegetarian king chastity? Even a year later, whether or not this inhumane vegetarian king system would still exist was still a question. So now Ryudo could be said to have thrown caution to the wind. After he heard colored glaze's sigh, he decided to give her the same treatment as Yunyen and Dunya, the same treatment of transforming from a girl into a woman. This. After hearing Ryudo's words, colored glaze realized that he seemed to be serious. In essence, colored glaze didn't dislike being hugged by Ryudo, but this sudden request was a bit too sudden, and the girl didn't know how to react for a moment. On the soft bed, the girl's body trembled slightly, like a little white rabbit that was about to be eaten by a big gray wolf. Although colored glaze didn't know about the matters between men and women, when she thought that she was about to experience it, she couldn't help but feel nervous. After feeling his first wife's nervousness, Ryudo reached out and held her chin and gently smiled. "It's okay, just relax. If you're too nervous, you might not be able to go in." Wait, I feel like I'm still not ready. Why don't we, just when colored glaze was about to say, "Why don't we come back another time?" Ryudo had already lowered his head and kissed her and took out a small steel ball and directly hit the light bulb switch on the wall not far away. Pa! Accompanied by a soft sound, Ryudo's room was suddenly shrouded in thick darkness. Tonight, the moon was bright and the stars were sparse. The air was already cold in the winter. But as colored glaze in the room gradually entered the zone under the guidance of a skilled person, the pitch-black bedroom was filled with a feeling of spring that even the moonlight shyly hid in the clouds. 3,000 words omitted. Chapter 314. That night, just as Ryudo was gently bringing colored glaze up the stairs of the Lord's mansion, on the other side of the Kamishiro Imperial Garden, a woman who looked quite similar to colored glaze was looking at the bright moon hanging high in the sky with a thoughtful expression. Although it was the middle of winter, the moon was still as bright as ever and wasn't covered by the cold wind and dark clouds in the air. "What's going on? I keep feeling uneasy, as if something is about to happen. Currently, the woman who was standing in a garden in the Kamishiro Imperial Garden and looking at the moonlight in the sky was naturally the owner of this place, Kaneshiro Ruehue. Currently, Ruehue was wearing a very simple white robe with long sleeves, which set off her elegant figure and made her seem as elegant as a fairy under the moonlight. Today, Kaneshiro Ruehue could be said to have welcomed the first great victory in her life. Originally, the motion that Iwasaki Yaosuke had initiated against this Kamiyoshi was completely rejected, and the golden heron Yatsuki was also facing the end of his life. At the same time, Ruehue also secretly cleaned up the Kamiyoshi clan that followed Yoshiyuki and his father. She also threw Yoshiyuki into a mental hospital and let him spend the rest of his life there. As for Kaneshiro filial piety, he was going to be used as a chess piece to take over all of Iwasaki Reiko's assets. If he cooperated, she would let him live. If he didn't, then she could only send him to the mental hospital to reunite with his father. After finishing all of her work, the current situation could be said to be great. Even Ruehue herself didn't expect that the Yatsuki would be defeated so quickly under the continuous attacks. Of course, the Yatsuki couldn't be blamed for being useless. It could only be said that Ruehue, Colored Glaze, Ryudo, and Kyoji were too powerful when they worked together. Especially Ryudo, his unscrupulous style of doing things with the Black Hand Alliance made many people feel true fear. After Iwasaki's death, people were even more worried about this monster organization that could easily assassinate the Golden Heron. But it didn't matter. What Ruehue needed to do next was to rope in some of the Yatsuki and suppress some of them. Before the other two Golden Herons could organize a countermeasure, she would push Kyoji to the position of Golden Heron. This way, the situation would be settled. Until now, up to this point, Ruehue didn't feel that there was anything wrong with the current situation. So, she should be drinking in her room to sleep, happily, and having a good dream. She shouldn't be here in the cold wind in the middle of the night. But for some reason, Ruehue had a feeling that something was about to happen. This feeling didn't make any sense, and there was no evidence to support it, but she still felt that way. Since ancient times, the Kamiyoshi kings were believed to have strong spiritual power and could predict the future. Although Ruehue, who had once been the vegetarian king, knew that the so-called spiritual power was actually nonsense, she still had the ability to foresee the future. Just like tonight, Ruehue could clearly sense a strange aura in the air. It was as if a sharp blade would pierce through the darkness at any moment and take away her life as the leader of the Kamikaze clan. But that shouldn't be possible, right? Not to mention the perfect defense system around the Kamiyoshi Imperial Garden. Just the dozens of carefully trained guardian ninjas inside the garden was enough to make all assassins in the world despair. After all, when it came to assassination, ninjas were the true experts. And the guardian ninjas who protected the Kamiyoshi tribe for generations were not only proficient in assassination, but also in all kinds of methods to counter assassination. So, ever since Ruehue fell out with Ayam, she had suffered countless assassination attempts, but she had never been touched by the assassins sent by Ayam. Ayam, come to think of it, that guy should be attacking soon. Thinking of the girl who was only in her 20s, but had already fallen deep into the bottomless abyss, Ruehue couldn't help but sigh. After all, a long time ago, she had experienced an unforgettable time with that little girl, but unfortunately, in the end, the fate of the two still stepped into the reincarnation of their ancestors. Unknowingly, Ruehue was immersed in the memories of the past, immersed in the memories of herself and Ayam. Even if more than 10 years had passed, Ruehue couldn't forget the strong shock she felt when she first saw the young Ayam. It was a meeting in the unseen world, a meeting between Golden Osmanthus and Black Rose that shouldn't have happened. It was a night 18 years ago, even the Colored Glaze hadn't been born yet, and Ruehue had just taken off the burden of vegetarian king and broke free from nearly 20 years of house arrest. And just when Ruehue walked alone in the cold night, came to the Osmanthus tree next to a lake in the suburbs of Tokyo to enjoy the flowers, she unexpectedly met the little girl who was standing alone by the lake. In the remote suburbs, the night as deep as the abyss and the lakeside. Under Ruehue's surprise gaze, the little girl was waving her tender little hands, nailing beautiful butterflies to the tree with mallets and nails. What are you doing? Seeing the hundreds of wings nailed to the tree, which looked cruel and full of strange beauty, Ruehue couldn't help but ask the child. Catching butterflies, and then playing with butterflies. Facing Ruehue's question, the little girl who looked at most 6 or 7 years old turned her head slightly, using the pair of clear pupils to look at the big sister, who suddenly appeared. Even now, Ruehue had to admit that when she first saw Ayam, she really had a feeling of being attracted by the girl's unusual beauty and strange temperament. At that time, Yongji was still a delicate little girl who looked like she was carved out of jade. She looked very petite and cute. Her facial features were so delicate that people suspected that a finely crafted doll came to life. Her black and beautiful long hair was casually draped behind her back, and her expression was indifferent. She didn't look like an ordinary 6 or 7-year-old girl. Under the moonlight, the lakeside, under the osmanthus tree, the silver light was everywhere, and the lake water was flowing. The girl quietly bathed in that layer of brilliance, as if integrated into this beautiful dreamlike scene. Even though Ruehui was a woman, she couldn't help but think that this little girl was really too beautiful. She was like a legendary lakeside fairy or a moonlight fairy. It was hard to imagine how beautiful this little girl would be when she grew up. Of course, the legendary elves wouldn't do such a wicked thing as catching so many butterflies and nailing them to the tree. Therefore, Ruehue made the initial judgment of the girl, a naughty child with an impeccable appearance and temperament, but with a very strange temperament. But even if the girl did such a thing, Ruehue didn't have any prejudice against her at first. After all, many children would do things like crushing ants and throwing stones at birds when they were young. After all, the 3 views of young children hadn't been formed yet. No matter what they did, the first blame had to be carried by the parents. It could only be blamed on the parents for not giving the correct guidance. Thinking of this, Ruehue, who had just come out of the Qinzhai Divine Palace, became excited and started chatting with the little girl by the lake. You can catch butterflies, but after catching them, don't nail them to the tree. That way, the butterflies will die, understand? Like a young mother educating her little daughter, Ruehue pulled her to sit under the tree and patiently guided her. But after hearing Ruehue's words, the girl asked in confusion, "Butterflies will die. Is there something wrong with that? All living things will die. So will you, so will I, so will all living things." Hearing the girl's reply, Ruehue couldn't help but be stunned. After all, she didn't expect such a young girl to be able to say such philosophical words. But even so, Ruehue still smiled and said, "Indeed, the birth and death of all things is a part of the heavenly cycle, but that's the law of nature. It's not something we should actively interfere with." In other words, I can't kill butterflies? The little girl blinked and asked again, "But people are clearly killing chickens, fish, and pigs every day. Isn't this against the law of nature?" It's not that humans can't take the lives of animals, but that's based on a need and not for a moment of fun. Seeing that the little girl seemed to be more intelligent than her peers, Ruehue explained the meaning of the existence of chickens, ducks, pigs, and cows. Ruehue didn't object to killing for survival or other practical needs. She wasn't the kind of person who overflowed with Mother Mary's heart. She also knew that the survival of humans couldn't be separated from the demands of other creatures. But if it wasn't for survival or other practical needs to kill, this was a very bad situation in Ruehue's view. It was absolutely not allowed. After telling these things to the little girl, she was silent for a moment, then said something that Ruehue didn't expect. "The reason why I kill butterflies is not to play with them, but if I don't do this, I can't feel the feeling of being alive." Under the lush osmanthus tree, the little girl looked at the butterflies that she nailed to the tree, and a strong sense of malice flashed in her eyes. That's right, malice. It was hard to imagine that such a young girl would have such obvious malice. This also showed that she was fundamentally different from normal humans. From the beginning, the little girl didn't come to this world to live. The only reason she was born was to kill, the more the better, the faster the better, and the more ruthless the better. But unfortunately, Rui Hui didn't notice the malice in her eyes at that time. If Rui Hui saw his expression, she might have made a different decision. Unfortunately, it was too late to say anything now. What a strange child. In the end, Rui Hui couldn't persuade the little girl to stop doing such things. She didn't even ask about her identity, and only knew that she lived nearby. Seeing that the night was getting darker, Rui Hui, who was preparing to go home, made a promise with the little girl to meet here tomorrow night. The little girl nodded, turned around, and walked to the side of the winding path. Soon, she disappeared into the darkness. Chapter 3:15. What a strange child. But for some reason, I feel like I'm destined to meet her. After Rui Hui shook her head and left, she arrived at the lakeside the next day at around the same time as promised and saw the strange little girl again. But this time, Rui Hui didn't come empty-handed. She also brought her favorite toy when she was a child, Oshiki Featherboard. The so-called Oshiki Featherboard was actually a simple way to play badminton. It was said that during the Edo period, every first month, the adults would give a girl a rectangular drawing board with a pattern on it and a handle on the bottom. It meant to ward off evil spirits. Later, when the female officials in the palace were bored, they began to use the featherboard to play games. They would hit each other with the board, which made it less and less ceremonial. It gradually became a traditional game. What is this? When Rui Hui handed over the featherboard with a kabuki pattern on it, the little girl couldn't help but tilt her head, as if she had never seen such a strange thing before. This is called a featherboard. It's a game tool. Didn't you say you haven't played any games? I'll let you play with it today. When the little girl curiously looked at the featherboard that Rui Hui treasured since childhood, Rui Hui couldn't help but nod. From yesterday's conversation, the little girl seemed to live in a very strict family. Although she knew a lot of knowledge beyond her age and was very mature, she didn't know anything about children's entertainment. It's the kind of family that strictly educates children from a young age, but neglects the fun of childhood. Children growing up in such a family are easy to develop psychological problems. Because Rui Hui grew up in the Kamiyoshi family, she understood the little girl's feelings very well. This featherboard was given to me by my mother-in-law, who worked in my family when I was young. Now, I'm giving it to you. You have to cherish it. Looking at the traditional kabuki pattern in the little girl's hand, Rui Hui couldn't help but reach out and pat her little head. Although the little girl didn't say anything from her expression, Rui Hui knew she was interested in this thing. So Rui Hui took out another featherboard and a badminton ball and began to teach her this strange game of using a table tennis racket to play badminton. In short, you just have to hit the ball back. I understand. After Rui Hui finished explaining how to play the featherboard, the little girl nodded. Although it's not easy to hit at first, you'll learn soon. In the quiet lake at night, Rui Hui threw the badminton ball in her hand and gently hit it in the direction of the little girl. Because the opponent was a pure newbie, Rui Hui played the ball very slowly and deliberately let it float in the air in a parabolic shape for a while. This way, the little girl would not be flustered. But it turned out Rui Hui was thinking too much. The next moment, the little girl's body, like a wild cat hunting in the dark. Holding the featherboard in his right hand, he slammed it into the incoming feather ball. Whoosh! Bang! Accompanied by a strong gust of wind, the flying feather ball brushed past the side of Rui Hui's head at an incredible speed, blowing her soft hair into the air. What is this? Am I dreaming? After this round, Rui Hui was still standing there in a daze. She couldn't believe what she just saw. It was hard to imagine that such a delicate little girl could have such exaggerated skills. The badminton ball felt like a professional badminton player smashing. Seeing that Rui Hui couldn't catch the ball and was stunned, the little girl asked in confusion, "How is it? Does this count as my win? Yes, so please. The corner of Rue Huey's mouth twitched, but she still picked up a brush dipped in ink and handed it over. This is? The traditional punishment in badminton is that the winner can draw a stroke on the loser's face. Not too much, just one stroke. As if she had accepted her fate, Rue Hui leaned her flawless face over and pointed at her left cheek, indicating that she should draw there. It was the little girl's first time doing something like this. After thinking for a while, she picked up the brush with her slender white hand and drew a V on Rue Huey's left cheek. Okay, now you're familiar with the game? Let's continue. Although her face was drawn, Rue Hui still smiled and pulled the little girl to continue playing. However, she was still somewhat unsatisfied. Damn it, I don't believe that after playing badminton for so many years, I can't even beat a 6 or 7-year-old girl who is playing for the first time. See if I don't draw all over your face. Looking at the little girl who was about to serve, Rue Hui couldn't help but think. However, whoosh. Pa. You have some skills. Oh, again. Again. Oh, woo. After more than 10 minutes, Rue Huey's tone changed from leisurely to irritable, and more graffiti appeared on her face. After the 26th stroke, Rue Hui, who was already a cat, couldn't help but support herself with her hands on the ground, as if she was too ashamed to face anyone. Trash. So I'm trash. I can't even beat a 6 or 7-year-old girl. Ha ha ha. Although she knew that her physical fitness wasn't very good, Rue Hui didn't expect it to be this bad. In other words, she didn't expect the little girl's motor skills to be this strong. Are you okay? Seeing Rue Hui lying on the ground, the little girl who still had a clean face couldn't help but squat in front of her and asked in confusion, "Do I look okay to you?" Rue Hui said as she raised her head to let the little girl see her miserable state. Now that originally beautiful face had been drawn from top to bottom, from left to right. Coupled with Rue Huey's extremely bewildered expression, it was really very funny. Uffed. As if she was amused by the big sister's miserable face, the little girl finally couldn't help but laugh. Ever since Rue Hui met her, this was the first time she saw the little girl's smiling face. She was already very beautiful. Even if her face hadn't grown, she could still charm people, making everyone's eyes unconsciously gather on her. At this moment, after being amused, she smiled sweetly, causing her cute little face to suddenly become a little more lively, becoming a lot more lively. That's right, little kids should smile more. It's not good to keep a straight face. Seeing the little girl finally smile, Rue Hui ignored the messy graffiti on her face and rubbed the little girl's face that still had some baby fat. Okay, let's continue playing. This, we can play. I'll go wash my face first. There's no place to draw anymore. Just like that, as Rue Hui ran to the clear lake to wash her face with a bitter smile, the two continued this interesting graffiti game. After that night, Rue Hui often made plans with the little girl to bring all kinds of toys to play with her. The two played from featherboard to sword jades, flower cards, top, kites, marbles, and so on. In nearly a month's time, they played all kinds of games that Rue Hui knew. As the two spent more time together, Rue Hui also had a deeper understanding of this little girl called Ayam. Although she only asked for a name and didn't know her surname nor her family background, Rue Hui really liked this smart little girl. During their time together, she even discovered that Youngji possessed various talents that were so perfect that they were almost inhuman. This little girl's learning ability, thinking ability, reaction speed, insight, motor nerves, and almost all the indicators of human excellence reached the level of genius. The most terrifying thing was that she wasn't just a genius in one area, but a genius in all areas. This meant that if she wanted, Ayam could easily become a scientist, an athlete, a politician, an artist, and so on when she grew up. She could even become the leader of her profession. Child of God. Ayam was like a child blessed by God. There was nothing that she couldn't do. In this world, as long as she wanted to do something, there was almost nothing that she couldn't do. This child's talent was so terrifying that even Rui couldn't help but feel a little afraid. Such a powerful child. Her future path might affect the future of the entire world. She had to guide her well. Whether it was because she hit it off with this child, or because she just finished being the vegetarian king and wanted to find something for herself to rely on, it was fine. In short, Rui tried to communicate with Ayam step by step, trying to instill good values into her. As the days passed, the relationship between the two got better and better. If someone who didn't know the situation passed by, they might think that this was a beautiful and cute mother and daughter. However, such days didn't last long. Just as Rui and Yongji were playing by the lakeside in the outskirts of Tokyo as usual, a middle-aged man dressed in a black ancient kimono stepped into the night, as if a devil from hell had found them. When a man with a very ancient samurai tsukuyami and a mustache on the side of his mouth appeared, Ayam, who was playing cards with Rui, couldn't help but scatter the cards in her hand on the ground. Yongji, the servants reported that you've been disappearing a lot at night recently. So you've come here? The man slowly opened his mouth and said with a tone that seemed to despise everything. However, when Rui saw the man's face, her body suddenly trembled violently. Rui knew this man. Of course she knew this man. How could she not know? Because this guy was the current head of the Chenmu clan that had been enemies with the Kamiyoshi clan for generations. He was also known as the most terrifying Chenmu clan in the past 100 years. Chenmu Yongye. Chapter 316. Rui, as the former house king of the Kanzai clan, naturally knew the history of the clan very well. A few hundred years ago, during the Warring States period, the demon king of the sixth heaven Oda Nobunaga was killed by his subordinate, Sensible Mitsuhide, in the famous Hinoji incident. Although Nobunaga died, one of his descendants inherited the demon king's beliefs and legacy under the surname Tenmu, and became the dark side hidden in history. The ancestor of the Kamiyoshi clan was Sensible Mitsuhide, who started the rebellion against Nobunaga. It was said that when Sensible Mitsuhide discovered the existence of the Tenmu clan, he married his daughter, Tamako, into the Shinto clan Kamiyoshi, and began to organize his family's forces to secretly fight against the Tenmu clan. At first, no one expected the two sides to fight for such a long time. From the Warring States period hundreds of years ago to the Edo period, the Clear period, the Taisho period, the Showa period, the Heisei period. Until today, there was still no clear victor. In the protracted battles, the Heavenly Eye race had been secretly improving the bloodline purity of their descendants through race modification, making their descendants more and more inhuman. As a result, they were able to gain an advantage in every battle. In the modern era, which was Ruei's generation, the Kamiyoshi clan was suppressed by their old enemies to the point where they couldn't even fight against the Tenmu clan. They could only rely on the Yatsuki clan's secret protection to survive. One of the main culprits that caused the gap between the two sides to widen was the current head of the Tenmu clan, Tenmu Yongye. The last time Rui saw Tenmu Yongye was before she entered the Tenma Shrine as the Tenma King. Although it had been more than 20 years, that meeting had left a deep impression on Rui. She always felt that she wasn't facing a human, but an alien creature in human skin. That's right, an alien creature in human skin. That was how Rui described Yongye. What's going on? Why is the head of the Tenmu clan here? And he even called out Ayam's name. Wait a minute? Evernight? Ayam? Could it be? Rui instinctively shielded Ayam behind her the moment she saw Yongyi. However, she immediately thought of a hair-raising answer. In order to make their offspring stronger, the Heavenly Eye clan had resorted to the outrageous method of breeding with the most ferocious criminals in every generation. Therefore, they had been improving the human race generation after generation. During this process of race improvement, besides the harsh training that every member of the Heavenly Eye clan had to undergo since they were young, it was said that they would use medicine, acupuncture, hypnosis, and even surgery to maximize the potential of the human body. Thinking about it from this angle, Iam's insanely powerful talent perfectly matched the results of the Heavenly Eye clan's genetic modification. Furthermore, her name was so similar to the current head of the clan, Yeongye. All these clues clearly pointed to the same answer. Could it be that Iam was a member of the Heavenly Eye clan? Isn't this the former Jai King, Dai Ruihui? What are you planning to do to my cute daughter? Just as Ruihui was shocked speechless by the sudden news, Yeongye looked at the woman who was shielding his daughter behind her and spoke in a tone that made one's scalp go numb. As the head of the Heavenly Eye clan, Yeongye naturally knew Ruihui. However, he didn't expect the former Jai King to be with his daughter for no reason. As expected, Iam was this man's daughter. Damn it. After receiving Yeongye's confirmation, Ruihui couldn't help but grit her teeth. However, she immediately grabbed Iam's shoulder and shouted behind her, "Rabbit ball. Ruyu. Qianin. Show yourself." Yes. Accompanied by a sharp voice that sounded like a sharp blade, several figures flew out from the small forest, not far away like lightning, directly blocking in front of Ruihui and Yeongji. These guardian ninjas were the members who were usually responsible for protecting Ruihui. Ruihui naturally knew that they were nearby, so she summoned all of them with an order and put on a posture, as if they were ready to fight at any time. However, when Yeongye saw this, he only smiled and sneered. "Oh, you can't be planning to kidnap my daughter and use her as a hostage, right? Really, this generation of the Kamiyoshi clan has also fallen." Rustle, rustle, rustle. Although his daughter was in the hands of the enemy, Yeongye didn't seem to be worried at all. With a wave of his hand, a few other figures in pitch-black tights flashed out from the shadows. Their speed was also as fast as lightning, not inferior to the people in front of them. The Kamiyoshi clan had the guardian ninjas that followed them for generations. The Heavenly Eye clan also had the black feather ninjas that followed them for generations. These two ninjas also came from the most powerful ninja legion in the Warring States period, the Wind Demon Ninjas. It is said that the Wind Demon Ninja Village was divided into two after the defeat of Nobunaga. The two leaders followed the Heavenly Eye clan and Kenzaki, respectively. They became two ninjas of the same clan but were mortal enemies. They were the Guardian Ninjas and the Black Feather Ninjas. If the situation after the meeting between Ruihui and Yeongye was tense, then the meeting between the Guardian Ninjas and the Black Feather Ninjas was not tense at all. It was a situation where a fight could break out at any time. After all, in the past so many years, the two sides had been constantly killing each other on the front line, and the hatred had long accumulated to the point that the mention of the two words made them gnash their teeth in hatred. They couldn't wait to pull out their weapons and turn the other party into ashes on the spot. But even so, as the leader of the Guardian Ninjas, Rabbit Ball hurriedly said to his master, "Ruihui-sama, you should leave first. It will be very dangerous here after a fight." "Okay." After nodding, Ruihui said to Iam, who was in her arms, "Iam, come with me." From the moment Yeongye appeared, Iam didn't say anything, and her attitude was very calm. This made Ruihui not know what this child was thinking. But no matter what, Ruihui couldn't let Iam continue to stay with the Heavenly Eye clan. After all, she knew that the Heavenly Eye clan had a notorious coming-of-age ceremony. That is, all the children of the clan will be thrown into a building and let them kill each other. The one who comes out alive will be the next head of the clan. Thinking that Iam will be involved in this kind of tragedy in the future, Ruihui couldn't help but feel numb, so she wanted to take Iam with her at this time. "Go with you." "Where to?" After hearing the words of his big sister, Iam showed a somewhat puzzled expression. "To Big Sister's." "Oh." Ruihui originally wanted to say to Big Sister's house, but halfway through, she couldn't help but stop. Obviously, as Iam was a member of the Heavenly Eye clan, the Kamiyoshi clan would not allow Ruihui to take her in. After all, the current Ruihui was only the former Jaiwang, and the position of head of the clan was still in her uncle's hands. Although Ruihui's words didn't carry much weight, she couldn't change the decision of the entire clan by herself. So if Rue Hui took Iam back just like that, Iam would only end up being caught by the elders of the clan and burned to ashes. Wouldn't that be causing her death for nothing? After sensing Rue Hui's hesitation, Yongye couldn't help but laugh. Rue Hui Kaneshiro, is there something wrong with your head? Don't tell me you've fallen in love with my daughter? Anyway, I can't just watch as your clan tramples on her. Trample? You must have misunderstood something. Yongye laughed coldly and said, her father is me, and her mother is a murderer who committed 23 murders in London. Do you really think that a child like her can integrate into the normal world? How would I know if I don't try? I'll use all my means to help her become a normal person, and whether it succeeds or not isn't up to you to decide. Rabbit Ball. Hold them back. Before he even finished speaking, Rue Hui pulled Iam and ran backward, and the Guardian Ninjas, led by Rabbit Ball, immediately started fighting with the Black Feather Ninjas. Hiss. In an instant, the smell of blood filled the air. The battle between ninjas was primitive and cruel. Every second could result in death, and injuries were common. Inhale, inhale, inhale. But just as Rue Hui pulled Iam and ran a few steps, the latter's small nostrils suddenly inhaled a whiff of blood, and then her feet suddenly stopped, revealing an intoxicated expression. Young. Iam? After realizing that she couldn't pull Iam away, Rue Hui looked at the young Iam with a surprised expression. Sorry, big sister. Compared to games like badminton, sword jades, and flower cards, I'm more interested in that. Hearing the sounds of the ninjas killing each other behind her and smelling the smell of blood, this little girl, who was at most 7 years old, couldn't help but reveal a strange smile. She was smiling. She was smiling. Yongji was smiling. Even in such a situation, she was smiling so brightly, as if she really enjoyed the scene of blood and flesh flying everywhere. And this cruel smile instantly shattered Rue Hui's heart. Iam's current behavior meant that Rue Hui's guidance over the past month or so was meaningless. The girl was still the same girl, still the young demon who liked to nail butterflies to trees, liked to destroy lives like toys. Iam, if you go back with him, you can't go back. When Iam broke free from her hand and walked toward eternal night, Rue Hui couldn't help but shout behind her. Rue Hui rarely spoke so loudly to people, and her words even had a trace of pleading. But even so, Iam still didn't stop. The little girl silently walked towards her father until she disappeared into the darkness along with the figure, leaving Rue Hui alone on the spot, feeling a sense of loss. After that, Rue Hui didn't even know how she returned home. It was obvious that the incident had a huge impact on her. The former Zhaiwang felt like a piece of her heart was dug out, and she always felt that some place was empty, and there was no place to go. After that, Rue Hui first went home and sat in boredom for 3 days, and then went to Europe to find a high-end company that specialized in test tube babies, and spent a lot of money to give birth to a cute daughter. Since she no longer had any sustenance, she would just have to find a new one. With this thought in mind, Rue Hui finally gave birth to a healthy girl 10 months later. Until when she held the newly born colored glaze in her arms, the emptiness in Rue Hui's heart was filled, and she felt that she was alive again. It was hard to imagine that colored glaze's origin was actually related to Iam. It was actually related to the witch who killed her father, Eternal Night, with her own hands, and had long since lost her humanity. For colored glaze, this was undoubtedly a huge insult. Of course, Rue Hui had already decided to take this to the grave and would never let her cute daughter know. Chapter 317. Although more than a decade had passed, Rue Hui would still feel uneasy whenever she thought of that melancholy night. Just like now. But on this originally quiet night, Rue Hui shouldn't have thought of that incident unless she had some kind of ominous premonition. This feeling, could it be? Forget it, I'm probably thinking too much. However, just as Rue Hui sighed and was about to return to her room to rest, a gust of wind suddenly swept through the darkness not far away. Whoosh! A black light, a sharp black luster appeared from the darkness, and flew towards Rue Huey's slender neck, as if it was going to cut her throat open. Bang! The next moment, another even smaller white light flashed at the same time and shot down the black light in midair. What? After hearing the collision not far away from her, Rue Hui finally understood why she felt uneasy today. Someone really wanted to deal with her. Before she could react, the sound of a fierce battle suddenly came from the wall not far away. Then two figures fell for more than 10 meters in the air and landed in the middle of the garden not far from Rue Hui. Who are you? After landing, the slightly old figure standing on Rue Hui's side, the leader of the Guardian Ninja, Cathouse Bunnyball, couldn't help but frown and looked at the man in black in front of him with a serious gaze. Although the black-clothed man was wearing a mask that covered half of his face, judging from his exposed pupils and skin, this black-clothed man shouldn't be too old. At most, he looked to be in his 30s. But what surprised Bunnyball wasn't his age, but this man was really too strong. Just when he noticed the first sneak attack on Rue Hui, Bunnyball threw out a long needle to block the flying sharp weapon while attacking the enemy's hiding place. In just a few seconds, the two had actually exchanged more than 10 blows on the wall and in the air, but the result was a draw. That's right, the result was a draw. In other words, this young man actually had strength that wasn't inferior to Bunnyball. This was a bit too shocking. Is it the Black Feather Ninja from the Heavenly Eye group? But I don't remember there being such a strong person in the Black Feather group, and he looks very young. Also, how did he sneak in here? Kamishiro Imperial Garden has the tightest security around it. Even I can't sneak in without alerting anyone. Where did this guy come from? Rabbitball's slightly turbid eyes stared fixedly at his opponent. At the same time, many figures darted out from the surroundings like lightning, surrounding the black-clothed man in a pincer attack. Surrounded by the leader of the Guardian Ninja and several elite ninjas, if it was an ordinary person, they would have already panicked and prepared to escape in a hurry. But the man in black was different. He just looked at Bunnyball coldly, the corner of his mouth hidden in the mask raised slightly, revealing a disdainful smile. Are you thinking who I am? It turns out that there are things that even the famous Cathouse spreading rabbit balls doesn't know about. In front of so many people, the man said with his abnormally hoarse voice that seemed to have been ruined by something. When he mentioned the words Cathouse Bunnyball, his tone faintly became heavier. This made Rue Hui see that there must be some kind of personal grudge between him and Bunnyball. If there was a grudge with Bunnyball, then it was most likely the Black Feather Ninja from the Heavenly Eye group. After all, Bunnyball had killed countless Black Feather Ninja in his life, so the grudge was as deep as the sea. But even the current head of the intelligence department of the Heavenly Eye group and Black Feather Ninja leader, Zhonghua, was a bit weaker than Bunnyball in terms of strength. It was impossible for him to make Bunnyball show such a serious expression. But even if he couldn't figure out the person's identity, Bunnyball still said faintly, "The technique you just used is the Black Feather Ninja's secret technique. Your identity is obvious. There's no need to think." Ever since the strongest Wind Demon Ninja was split into two, each side took a part of the secret technique, so the Black Feather Ninja and Guardian Ninja's techniques were very different and could be recognized at a glance. "Oh, is that so? Then you better watch carefully." But the man sneered again, his body flashed, and in the blink of an eye, he was in front of Bunnyball. Rabbitball wasn't surprised that this guy had super god speed that wasn't inferior to his own, because he had already seen his strength. But what made Bunnyball's eyes widen was the man's hand movements. The black-clothed man's right hand lashed out like a whip as he sprinted forward. His 3 fingers, index, middle, and nameless, were like the tip of a whip as he attacked the enemy in a half-stabbing, half-waving manner. In that instant, the air along the way seemed to be cut in half. The excessively fast arm movement caused the tip of the fingers to reach supersonic speed. Using this speed to stab out the 3 fingers, the power was enough to pierce 3 holes in steel. Such a powerful move, Bunnyball was very familiar with it, because this was the Guardian Ninja's technique that he had used for most of his life, sacrificial blade. Putting the 3 fingers together in a shape, using a whip-like technique to swing out the arm, the tip of the fingers would reach supersonic speed, causing an almost unblockable penetrative damage. In the past many years, Bunnyball had used secret technique, sacrificial blade, to kill who knows how many opponents. But this was the first time he personally experienced the power of this move. How was this possible? How could a black feather ninja use the Guardian Ninja's technique? In the blink of an eye, although Bunnyball was astonished, he still swung his arm and used a standard blade sacrifice that could be used as a textbook move to stab in that direction. Sacrificial blade against sacrificial blade. The 6 fingers collided in the air, but it gave off a strong wind-breaking sound like 2 whips colliding. Pa! The violent explosion spread like a shockwave to Rui Hui, who was dozens of meters away, making her unconsciously take half a step back. After the commotion, Bunnyball and the black-clothed man respectively retreated. But the difference between the two was that the black-clothed man only took 3 steps back, while Bunnyball took 5 steps back. How? How was this possible? He actually used the Guardian Ninja's technique that was passed down from generation to generation, and he could even force the leader to retreat? When they saw the scene just now, the surrounding Guardian Ninjas couldn't help but widen their eyes, showing an expression of disbelief. All ninjas know that secret technique is definitely not something that can be learned simply by imitation. It not only takes a long time to practice, but also requires some special auxiliary methods to practice. And these auxiliary methods to practice secret technique are absolute secrets. Only Bunnyball and a few high-level ninjas can master it. So, secret technique is basically impossible to fall into the hands of the enemy. Who are you? After taking a few steps back, Bunnyball couldn't help but take a deep breath and asked for the second time. For some reason, Bunnyball always felt that this black-clothed man gave him a familiar feeling, as if he had seen this guy before. Humph, it's not strange that you don't know. After all, in your impression, I'm probably a dead man. Suddenly, the black-clothed man slightly smiled and finally reached out to take off the mask that covered half of his face. Under the mask, it was a man who looked at most 30 years old, with a handsome face, but the corner of his mouth raised with a strong evil aura. In terms of appearance alone, there was nothing special about this man's appearance. At most, he looked like an evil ninja who had just walked out of a brothel. This is. But when he saw that familiar face, Bunnyball's eyes widened. Because he did know this man, and he really thought that this man was already dead, and this man's name was Mirage. You're actually still alive. In an instant, Bunnyball finally shouted out this name, shouted out the name that he gave him, Cathouse Mirage. Indeed, the name Mirage was given by Bunnyball, because he was Bunnyball's grandson. He was Bunnyball's true blood relative. Mirage? Cathouse Mirage? It can't be. Wasn't he already dead? When Rui Hui heard this name, she frowned slightly as well. According to what Rui Hui knew, Bunkamaru originally had relatives, but his daughter and son-in-law had already died in the battle with the Black Feather Ninja, and the only grandson left behind was a freak with an abnormal brain. That's right, Bunnyball's grandson Cathouse Mirage was a freak, or it could be said that he was too ambitious. As early as 10 years ago, the very young Mirage had already begun to gather his own forces in the shinobi, and he also planned to assassinate all the members of the Kamiyoshi clan, seize the foundation of the Kamiyoshi clan, and restore the prestige of the Wind Demon Shinobi. But because of the protection of the elite ninjas, including Bunnyball, such a madman naturally couldn't succeed. In the end, Mirage was chased all the way to the edge of the cliff by Bunnyball, and he fell off the cliff, leaving only a bloody corpse. So according to reason, Mirage should have died long ago. Then why did he appear more than 10 years later today? Could it be that the corpse that I found that year was fake? This kid actually faked his death? Thinking of this, Bunnyball slightly gritted his teeth. Obviously, he already knew what kind of trick he fell into that year. Did you know? But it's already too late. Seeing his grandfather gritting his teeth, Mirage sneered. I have been working for Ayam-sama for the past 10 years, during which I have mastered all the skills of the Black Feather and Kenzaki ninjas. In other words, I am now the strongest ninja in the world. Chapter 318. Good. So that's how it is. After listening to Huan and An's explanation, everyone understood why he was so strong. Originally, Blackfeather and Guardian Deity were ninjas that split from Wind Demon Ninja. Both sides have mastered half of Wind Demon Ninja. However, Huan An had been practicing the inner technique of the Guardian Ninja ever since she was a child. Later on, she joined Yongji and practiced the inner technique of the Black Feather Ninja, becoming a monster who was good at two things. From this point of view, Jinan is indeed worthy of being the strongest ninja of the current generation, because he is the only one who truly mastered all the techniques of the ancestors of the Wind Demon Shinobi. Humph. So what? But when everyone was shocked by Huan and An's situation, Bunkamaru coldly snorted and said, "It's not that the more skills you have, the stronger you are in the end, it's still strength that speaks." Yes, I like your way of saying it, so let's fight. After saying that, Huan An took a deep breath. His body trembled slightly, and an excited expression appeared on his handsome face. The reason why he trembled wasn't because he was afraid, but because he was too excited. For Huan An, this scene was without a doubt his lifelong wish. 10 years, 10 years. Do you know how I spent these 10 years? Ever since his plan to assassinate Kandai Ruihui failed, and he was chased by his grandfather, Huan An almost every day thought about the scene where he fought with his grandfather again. Resentment, strong resentment supported this man, and in these 10 years he trained like a madman, regardless of the cost. As long as he could kill Bunkamaru, as long as he could destroy the Kamiyoshi clan, he would do anything. After 10 years, this man was like a poisonous blade that was soaked in poisonous water for 10 years. The blade reappeared, and the pitch-black blade almost merged with the darkness, enough to cut any light into dust. Protect Ruihui-sama. You still have time to care about others. Before the battle, Bunkamaru hurriedly shouted to the ninjas next to him, but Huan An couldn't help but laugh. Guardian God's inner technique, Wind Demon Step. Without waiting for the surrounding ninjas to reach Ruihui, they saw the figure of Huan An suddenly disappeared from where she stood. When he reappeared, countless streaks of jet-black cold light had already scattered around Rabbit Ball's body like stars. Black Feather inner technique, skeletal hand. Huan An's hands like a storm. The fierce attack suddenly forced Bunkamaru back, and he couldn't fight back. But even so, Bunkamaru was still the strongest among the Guardian God's ninjas. While his body slid back rapidly, 6 long needles shot out from his hands like a celestial maiden scattering flowers, piercing towards 6 vital points in front of Huan An's body. The long needle condensed with the powerful Dan force has the power to pierce a hole in steel. Even the Huan An can't do it. Huh? Under Rabbit Ball's astonished gaze, Huan An completely ignored his attack and continued to move forward, allowing the 6 needles to pierce into his chest, abdomen, and other vital acupoints. Bang! In the next second, Bunkamaru's figure flew up like a tree trunk hit by a car. When he landed, there was a deep wound on the left side of the old man's abdomen. Of course, if Bunkamaru didn't try to dodge, his internal organs might have been dug out. Huan An's current lethality was so amazing. Huan An, who was stabbed by the needles, was unscathed, as if Bunkamaru's needles couldn't break through his body's defense. How is this possible? My needles actually, what era is it now? Still playing this kind of outdated trick? I am really ashamed of you. In front of Rabbit Ball, Huan An casually pulled out the long needle that was stuck in her body. Then, with a pinch of her palm, she crushed it into powder. Clothes? Is this guy's clothes strange? At this time, Bunkamaru looked carefully and found that the black tights Huan An was wearing didn't even have a hole, which means that the clothes have the ability to block the needles. Did you find it? This is Heavenly Eye Group, Weapon Department, spent a lot of money to create a special protective battle suit. It is so tough that even bullets can't penetrate it, and it can dissipate most of the impact. Noticing Bunkamaru's gaze on his battlesuit, Huan An showed a look of disdain. With this special battlesuit, Bunkamaru's needles were useless. There was no way to pierce through Huan An's acupoints. On the contrary, Huan An could use Bunkamaru as a target to beat him up. As long as he hit him, he would be heavily injured. The attack and defense of both sides were not on the same level. Even in terms of skills, Huan, who had mastered all the skills of the Wind Demon Ninja, was stronger than Rabbitoshi, and not just by a little. In this situation, there was no suspense in the battle. It was just a one-sided trampling. Huan let out a crazy laugh while using all kinds of techniques to attack Bunkamaru. Bunkamaru could only dodge and run for his life. Too strong. Too strong. Is there really someone in this world who can compete with him? When the few guardian ninjas who stayed here saw their leader being suppressed, they couldn't help but feel a chill in their heart. They even looked at Huan, and with a trace of fear in their eyes. Originally, the Black Feather Ninja was good at a variety of killing techniques, that is, heavy damage and light body techniques. On the other hand, the inner skills that the Guardian Ninja was good at were mainly various body movement techniques, which were light and heavy body movement techniques. Both sides have their own strengths and weaknesses, so in the past hundreds of years, they have been fighting without winning or losing, and it is difficult to completely destroy each other. But now, this man called Cat House Huan had completely broken the stalemate. Right now, Huan had combined the heavy damage of Black Feather and the lightning-fast body movement of Guardian, together with a high-tech protective battlesuit made by the weapons division of the Heavenly Eye clan. She had truly reached a level where her attack, defense, speed, and technique were flawless. How can he fight? How can he fight with such a monster? Thinking of this, those ninjas clenched their fists slightly, as if they were extremely desperate for the current situation. If it was in the past, to deal with this kind of monster, they could only use their lives to kill him. Groups of ninjas took turns to attack him, constantly consuming his stamina, and when he was tired, he could kill him. But Huan wasn't a fool. If he was really besieged by groups of ninjas, he would definitely turn around and run away, and if he wanted to escape, no one would be able to stop him. Therefore, it was very difficult to deal with Huan and with the power of Guardian Ninja alone. But even so, it doesn't mean that no one in this world can defeat him. After all, Rui Hui had already picked up her phone when she left and called the man who could be of great help at this time. Beep, beep, beep. Beep, beep, beep. At the same time, in the dim room of the Rulong Group headquarters, a familiar ringtone sounded. When she heard the ringtone, the woman who was lying in the man's embrace on a messy bed that seemed to have gone through a battle frowned and pinched the man's waist. Hurry up and answer the phone, it's so noisy. In the dark, Colored Glaze's voice sounded a bit hoarse. It was hard to imagine that she must have shouted herself hoarse just now. As for the reason, it was needless to say. Yes, yes, yes. After being pinched, Ryudo, who was lying on the bed and feeling the warmth of the body beside him, reluctantly got up. As a result, when he picked up the phone, he found that it was a call from Rui Hui. This was somewhat awkward. No way? I just ate Colored Glaze, and Mrs. Rui Hui called? Does she have Heaven's Eye? Looking at the name displayed on the phone, and then looking at Colored Glaze, who was lying on the bed in a daze like a puddle of mud, Ryudo swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Then he opened the call with trepidation. Originally, Ryudo thought that Rui Hui called to ask about Colored Glaze. So he quickly said, "That Mrs. Rui Hui? Liu Li is working here. I'll send her over in a while. Hurry up. Heavens, I sent a very powerful assassin. Rabbit Ball is no match for him." What? After hearing Rui Hui's urgent words, Ryudo suddenly widened his eyes. Then he jumped up from the bed. Such a big movement suddenly woke up Colored Glaze, so she shouted in an unhappy tone, "Annoying. Can't you let me sleep?" Huh. Hearing her daughter's voice from a phone, and those words seemed to have some other meaning. Rui Hui on the other end of the phone suddenly made a huh sound. So Rui Hui quickly asked, "Ryudo? Colored Glaze, that. Mrs. Rui Hui. I'll be there soon. You guys hang in there." This is troublesome. After knowing that Colored Glaze's voice was heard over there, Ryudo could only awkwardly hang up the phone, quickly put on his clothes, and rushed outside. Ryudo? Dragon. Forget it. When the phone was suddenly hung up, Rue Hui couldn't help but shake her head, but she probably already knew the situation over there. He had already told him not to lay his hands on Liuli before they got married, but in the end, he still turned a deaf ear to it. For some reason, when she thought that Ryudo and Colored Glaze might be lying on the bed just now, Rue Hui's heart actually had a sour feeling. Speaking of which, the one in the dragon battle is so strong. Can Liuli take it? Pooey. What am I thinking about? As if thinking of her previous experience, Rue Hui's face couldn't help but blush at this time. But she also knew that now was not the time to think about those things. So she quickly walked to the emergency safe house under the escort of the ninjas around her. Chapter 319. Just when Rue Hui was about to call for reinforcements, she unexpectedly heard her daughter's strange voice. The battle in the garden not far away was like a prairie fire that was burning fiercely. What's wrong? Do you only know how to hide? This is the style of the leader of the Guardian Ninja. In the Kamishiro Imperial Garden, under the cover of night, the arrogant voice of the cat house, Jinan, kept echoing, as if he was mocking the blood relative who almost killed him in the past. His every movement was lightning fast, and his attacks were so many that it was dazzling. It was as if there was a storm of blood in the garden. They couldn't intervene. Although the garden had attracted many guards and other guardian ninjas, all of them could only watch from afar. They couldn't intervene in a battle of this level. After all, Jinan's speed was so fast that even guns couldn't be aimed at him, and if they fired randomly, they might hit Rabbit Ball. But even if they wanted to shoot both of them together, Jinan's body was wearing a high-tech combat suit. Even if bullets hit it, it would be difficult to penetrate it. At that time, Rabbit Ball would die in vain. Bang! After a long time, accompanied by a crisp sound, the long needle in Rabbit Ball's hand broke again. Looking carefully, the ground of the battlefield had long been densely covered with broken long needles. It was obvious that this kind of weapon was almost useless against the illusory nunnery. It was as fragile as a toothpick. Huff, huff, huff. After this battle, Rabbit Ball, who finally managed to open up a distance, squatted on the ground and gasped for breath. The number of wounds on his body was frightening. Usually, Rabbit Ball always gave people the feeling of an elegant old gentleman. But now, this old gentleman was covered in blood. His clothes were torn everywhere. His hair was messy, and his glasses were long gone. Compared to Rabbit Ball, Jinan's face wasn't red and he wasn't panting, as if nothing had happened. Even his clothes weren't dirty. Just from this appearance alone, it could be seen how huge the difference in strength between the two sides was. Compared to Huanan, who was 40 years younger and had the advantage in terms of stamina, strength, speed, skills, equipment, and other aspects, Huanan was now 70 years old. Rabbit Ball, whose body had long been weakened, was simply no match for Huanan. You're too old man. But even at your peak, you're still no match for me. Huanan couldn't help but sigh when she saw Tu Wan gasping for air. She then said in a disdainful tone, although Huanan had been thinking of defeating Tu Wan every day and night for the past 10 years, he still felt an inexplicable sense of melancholy when he saw the old man gasping for breath under his attacks. In Huanan's impression, Rabimaru was a perfect ninja. His speed was as fast as lightning, and he could kill any opponent with a single strike. His mastery of various skills had already reached the point of perfection. 10 years ago, the illusory temple was so weak and powerless in front of Rabbit Ball. The figure in his eyes was so tall and mighty. But 10 years later, just 10 years later, the situation between the two sides was completely reversed. Today, in Huanan's eyes, Rabimaru was so weak and powerless, he was just an old man who was about to set foot on the road to hell. Is he too weak? No, I'm too strong. Thinking of this, Huanan couldn't help but look up at the bright moon, raised his chin high, and put on a posture of invincibility. Is so lonely. Not to mention how pretentious his posture was, how disgusting it was. But this guy's strength was not a joke. It seemed that he was really qualified to act like this. Damn it, has my body already weakened to such an extent? For Rabbit Ball, watching this grandson showing off in front of him, his mood was naturally quite indignant. At this moment, a guardian ninja next to him shouted, "Leader, let's go together. Kill this kid." Yes. No matter how strong he is, he's just one person. We can't let him leave alive. Bodyguard team, get ready to fire at any time. You can shoot anywhere, as long as you hit him. For a time, a storm surged around the garden. Whether it was the guardian ninja or the professional bodyguards, they all aimed their weapons at Juan and, waiting for Rabbit Ball's order to join the battle. Who knew? Juan sneered, pointed up, and laughed. "Old man, you don't think only you have helpers, right? I also have helpers, and they are stronger than yours." Hula, 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 hula. Before he could finish his sentence, 3 Apache-armed helicopters appeared several hundred meters above the Kamishiro Imperial Garden with a strong gust of wind. The single-barreled chain cannon and ground-to-ground missiles under the nose of the helicopters also faintly appeared in the airframe, as if they were ready to fire at any time. Armed helicopters? Using this thing in Yodo City? Looking at the 3 armed helicopters floating above their heads, everyone couldn't help but be shocked, and a chill rose from their backs and quickly spread to their whole body. Although the Kamishiro Imperial Garden also had an anti-missile system for bombing, even so, it was impossible to completely stop this level of air attack. Therefore, as long as the other side attacked, at least half of the ninjas and bodyguards in the garden below will be killed. Enough. At this time, Bunkamaru shook his head and said, "Juan, and you just want to fight me one-on-one. There's no need to do so much. As long as you don't let this group of minions interfere, then I naturally won't let the guys above ruin your mood. This is very reasonable, isn't it?" Speaking of this, the corner of Juan An's mouth slightly raised. Obviously, the purpose of Juan in coming this time was to kill Bunkamaru or kill Ruihui. At least before Bunkamaru died, he will adhere to the principle of one-on-one combat and not continue to expand the fire of war. But if other ninjas and Imperial Garden bodyguards want to fight, then the situation will be difficult to say. Bunkamaru naturally understood his meaning, so he said to the people around, "You don't need to do anything, I will deal with him." "But leader, deal with me?" Juanan heard this and laughed. "What are you going to do with me? With your superb dodging skill just now? Unfortunately, running away can't get rid of people." Hearing Juanan's ridicule, Bunkamaru didn't answer, but took out the last 6 long needles from his waist. Bunkamaru usually carried 72 long needles all over his body, and 66 of them were destroyed. This was the last weapon left. But this time, he didn't throw the long needles at Juanan, but held 3 in each hand. Without hesitation, he pierced the needles into his head. What? Seeing Bunkamaru's strange action, the smile on Juanan's face suddenly disappeared. This old man pierced Bai Hui, Shangxing, Qingguang, Benshin, Taiyang Fengqi, and stabbing so hard, isn't this suicide? Although Juanan wasn't as proficient in acupuncture like Bunkamaru, he was still a person who practiced Qi, so he naturally understood the situation of the human body. Generally speaking, there are many vital points in the head, and acupuncture on the head is only used to stimulate the head slightly, so as not to poke too hard. But now, Bunkamaru directly pierced half of the long needles. It doesn't look like acupuncture, it looks like suicide. But is Bunkamaru committing suicide? Yes and no. At this moment, Bunkamaru was using a suicidal acupuncture technique called Final Technique, Dead Meridian. After the acupuncture, it can release the human body's potential to the maximum, to the point of breaking through the limit. Who? Roar. The moment after the acupuncture, Bunkamaru's thin body suddenly swelled up. The hardened muscle fibers tore his clothes apart. The veins on his neck and cheeks popped out, and his eyes were bloodshot. Ferocious aura. A violent ferocious aura came from Bunkamaru's body, and his gaze towards Juan and became as terrifying as a beast looking at its prey. Sensing something amiss, Juanan sneered. "What kind of trick is this? You don't think?" But before he finished speaking, Bunkamaru had already made his move. Bunkamaru's usual attacks were as fast as lightning, but he was also very calm, like a gentleman from the darkness. But when he suddenly took a step forward, the ground exploded with a bang. Countless rocks shot towards Juan and like bullets. Meanwhile, the violent figure also charged in that direction. Bunkamaru seemed to only need one step to cross the distance of 10 meters, and a storm of attacks had already enveloped Juan. Inner technique, sacrificial blade dance. Under Juan and shock gaze, Bunkamaru's arms flashed like a peacock spreading its tail, as if a dozen people were using the sacrificial blade at the same time, bringing with it the momentum of smashing the enemy into pieces. But Juan did not show any weakness. His hands also danced, and his hands turned into sharp blades, quickly waving out. In an instant, a series of dense and shocking sounds of wind breaking and explosions came from between the two of them, causing the surrounding audience to tremble in fear. But after this situation lasted for a second, Juan's right leg could not help but take a step back. That's right, Juan retreated. He actually retreated, because he could not block Bunkamaru's attack. Of course, this was not something strange, because only Juan knew how terrifying Bunkamaru's attacks were. So fast and so heavy. Logically speaking, Juan should be much stronger than Bunkamaru in terms of physical strength. But now that both sides were using the sacrificial blade to fight, he could clearly feel a huge force as heavy as Mount I, and he was being pushed back step by step. This was the current Bunkamaru. This was Bunkamaru after using the final technique, Death Meridian. When he used this special acupuncture technique, he would release all the potential in his body. At the same time, Rabbit Ball's life would also rapidly wither away because he could not withstand this power. This was a move that would truly cause both of them to perish together. Chapter 320. Right now, Rabbit Ball was like a firework that was burning itself. It could only burn for a short period of time, but it couldn't last for too long. Of course, when he used the final skill, Death Meridian, Rabbit Ball was already prepared to die. He only wanted to make up for the mistakes he made in the past. His body quickly turned, like a ghost in the night, and in the blink of an eye, he was already beside Juanan, and a sacrificial blade silently stabbed the neck of Juanan. With Rabbit Ball's current strength, even through the combat suit, he could poke a bloody hole. So Juanan naturally didn't dare to be careless. So Juanan quickly stretched out his hand, and with a clever posture, he caught the stab from the bottom. And after catching it, he punched Rabbit Ball's heart. Rabbit Ball didn't want to take the punch, but his figure flashed and once again appeared behind Juanan. At the same time, he used the sacrificial blade to stab the back of Juan's head. This move was simply impossible to guard against. His figure flickered, and his shadow merged into one on the ground. Finally, when Juanan dodged the stab, he took the opportunity to kick him in the shin. Ka! At the same time, Juanan felt his leg go numb, and his leg was almost broken by Rabbit Ball's kick, and his body also staggered forward, showing the power of this kick. Taking advantage of the opponent's unstable body, Rabbit Ball's two hands swept out like a gust of wind, and the sacrificial blade almost fell on Juan's body without any pattern, as if he wanted to turn him into a meat paste. Such a violent fighting style made the surrounding Guardian Ninjas stunned. Previously, Rabbit Ball's battle gave people a pleasing feeling, but now it was like a violent storm, raging waves. Sharp blades swept out with a strong wind-breaking sound, and the wind and thunder were strong. In an instant, Juan's body was covered with injuries. Obviously, even the combat suit that could block bullets couldn't block Rabbit Ball's hands. If Juan had the upper hand in the previous battle, and Rabbit Ball was injured all over his body, then the situation was quickly reversed. With the blessing of the final skill, Death Meridian, Rabbit Ball has now recovered to the peak of his life, which is the time when he was invincible in the world, around 30 years old. Delightful, delightful. I didn't expect this old man to be able to recover to the peak of his life at the age of 70, and even kill that bastard grandson of mine. God is really good to me. incessantly launching attacks at the Mirage Temple, causing it to be riddled with wounds. Although 2-1 felt as though his body was creaking like a speeding old car, he still had a cheerful smile on his face. Of course, happy, too happy. Everyone who went against the Kanzai family had to die. This sentence was instilled into Bunny Ball by his father when he was very young. It was almost like brainwashing. Bunny Ball had almost forgotten his father's appearance and figure. After all, it had been 50 to 60 years since his father had perished together with the previous leader of the Black Feather Ninjas. Rabbit Ball, Rabbit Ball, Rabbit Ball of the past, Rabbit Ball the guardian ninjas, ninjas of the Kamiyoshi. Regardless of whether the family has been prosperous or unstable for hundreds of years, this group of ninjas have never forgotten their duties and have always been by his side. This level of service is far beyond the level of loyalty to the master. It is close to the level of faith. That's right, in Rabbit Ball's heart, the Kamiyoshi clan is his faith. Whether it is Lady Rue Hui or Lady Colored Glaze, as long as someone wants to harm them, even if it is the King of Heaven, they must die. But while Rabbit Ball was fighting with all his might, Huanan on the other side was miserable. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that 2-1 would actually have a hidden skill that could allow his strength to rise to such a level. This old man in his 70s used his hand as a blade. Every move he made was like an antelope hanging its horn. There was not the slightest trace of damage. Often, before Huanan could react, he felt a burning pain in his body. This kind of skill that replaced the blade with bare hands and super fast speed can be described as a ninja's profession characteristics incisively and vividly. Unknowingly, Huanan had dodged hundreds of steps in a row. At this time, he could only constantly move his body. He didn't even have time to take a breath. His heart was already suffering. I can't stop. If I don't keep moving, there is a high probability that I will be seriously injured by Rabbit Ball's blade, or even die on the spot. Damn it. This old man is crazy. I can't die here. Huanan knew that if this continues, it is only a matter of time before he is defeated. So he couldn't help but think of a way. From the beginning, Huanan was aiming to kill Rabbit Ball. In fact, when he forced out the final technique, Death Meridian, this goal was already achieved. A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. Let those guys directly bombard the Kamiyo Imperial Garden. I can also take the opportunity to escape. Thinking of this, Huanan also steeled his heart. While dodging and gasping for breath, he took the opportunity to make a special hand gesture to the 3 Apache helicopters floating a few hundred meters above. Although it was night, and Huanan's hand gesture wasn't particularly obvious, but he believed that the carefully trained, spread the martial arts mercenary group could see it clearly. After all, the Fighting Under the Heavens mercenary group was a mercenary group directly under Yongji. Every mercenary in the group was an elite that had fought their way out of the battlefield. Moreover, they had long been using binoculars to closely observe the situation here. Sure enough, when Huanan made the hand gesture, the helicopters that were floating in the air quickly turned around and began to fly over here. They are going to make a move. Seeing that the 3 helicopters were preparing to fly at a low altitude, and that the single-barreled chain cannons were about to open fire on the Kanzaki ninjas and the Imperial Garden's bodyguards, even the experienced ninjas couldn't help but feel a pang of panic. This was an armed helicopter, a genuine weapon of mass destruction on the battlefield. Although the Kamiyoshi ninjas also have weapons, these pistols, submachine guns, and other light weapons are no threat to the helicopters. They can only passively take a beating. Huanan, you, spread out. Everyone spread out. Seeing that Huanan, this bastard, actually ignored the previous agreement and summoned the helicopters to break into the battlefield, Bunkamaru angrily attacked him, while shouting at his companions. But even so, it was all too late. The single-barrel chain cannon below the helicopters began to spin and preheat, and at any time, it could spray out deadly sparks. However, the real magic wasn't this. But in the next moment, a rocket flew from the sky not far away, like a meteor. Whoosh! Boom! Before the closest helicopter could open fire, the rocket already drew a beautiful parabola in the night sky hundreds of meters away and landed on top of the helicopter and made a series of loud explosions. What? What the hell? In the next second, under the dumbfounded gazes of the people below, the helicopter that was flying at a low altitude like an eagle destroying its prey suddenly turned into a huge fireball, falling down shakily like a bird that had been shot down by a stone. Bang! With a loud crash, the helicopter crashed to the ground, and the pilot and the rest of the crew ended their lives with a great feat of smashing through a wall. Rocket launcher? Who is it? Juan and Anne's eyes almost popped out of their sockets when she saw the helicopter that Lady Yongji had sent to support her crash in the blink of an eye. She hurriedly looked in the direction where the rocket came from. It would have been better if Juan did not look up. At the same time, the other two rockets drew a beautiful arc in front and behind, respectively hitting the other two armed helicopters. How is this possible? Am I dreaming? When the last two helicopters turned into fireballs and fell to the ground, Juan couldn't believe his eyes. The three rockets that flew from hundreds of meters away accurately hit the helicopter's propellers and shot it down from the sky. This kind of thing is extremely difficult to happen. After all, rocket launchers were not meant to be used to deal with aerial units. The accuracy of the rocket launchers could only be described as worrying. Even in civilian battlefields, they had to rely on multiple rocket launchers to shoot down low-flying helicopters in unison to barely be able to take them down. However, the guy who fired the rockets from afar completely ignored this convention. Instead, he directly fired 3 rockets, and one of them hit an armed helicopter. Everyone had a share, and no one missed. What was even more frightening was that each of these rockets had predicted the distance of several hundred meters in advance and the arc of the parabola, and they had accurately hit the propeller that was guaranteed to be fatal. This kind of firing accuracy was simply amazing. Who the hell is it? I don't care. I just need to leave this place first. When the surroundings of the Mirage Nunnery were illuminated by the raging flames of the 3 helicopters, Rabbitball, who was not far away, was clutching his chest due to the final skill, Death Meridian, revealing a painful expression. But just as Juan was about to run away, a hand patted him on the shoulder like a ghost. Hey, don't go so fast. You haven't played with me yet. What? Before Juan could react, his right hand was firmly locked by a big hand like an iron clamp, and at the same time, a sharp pain accompanied by the crisp sound of bones cracking came from the first joint. Half a second. In just half a second, when Juan turned his head, one of his fingers had already been twisted and broken by someone in an executioner's action. And the person who approached the strongest ninja in history like a ghost and broke his fingers while laughing showed a malicious smile under the light of the fire. Chapter 321. This guy is Ryuto Kiryu? As the new head of the secret department of the Heavenly Eye Group, Juan also successfully promoted the previous head to the position of deputy head not long ago, so he naturally knows the enemies of the group. Now, in the Heavenly Eye Group, as long as the enemy of the group is mentioned, it is impossible to avoid this supreme emperor. According to the rumors, although Ryuto Kiryu has a human face, he should be some kind of non-human creature, and there are countless legends related to him. Is it that exaggerated? He is just a 17 or 18 years old kid. Whenever he heard the legend about Ryuto, Juan couldn't help but show a disdainful expression, and secretly said in his heart that he must personally take off that guy's head in the future. However, now that Ryuto has circled behind him like a ghost, and even grabbed his hand and broke his knuckles, Juan knew that the legend was not exaggerated at all, or rather, those legends did not reflect the horror of this man at all. How is it possible? How did he get behind me? For Juan, it is an extremely inconceivable thing for Ryuto to get behind him silently. You know, he is a ninja, an expert at the back, an expert at sensing aura. How can he be easily circled to the back by others? As long as there is a trace of aura, Juan can definitely find someone behind him. But Ryudo didn't even reveal a trace of aura. Of course, if Ryudo knew Huan An's doubts, he would definitely laugh out loud. Nonsense, I have full proficiency in the aura shielding technique and silent movement technique. As long as I don't want to be discovered, I can dance in front of your bed in the middle of the night and you won't find out. But now Huan didn't have time to think about how Ryudo got behind him. His attention was focused on his right hand that was caught. Gotcha! Accompanied by the crisp sound of bones cracking, before Huan could react. His thumb had already been twisted into the shape of a fried dough twist. This bastard. Huh. After reacting, Huan quickly rotated his body in the air, trying to use the force of the rotation to get rid of Ryudo's grasp and open the distance. Who would have thought that the moment his body leaped up and spun, the huge force transmitted from that hand directly fixed his muscular and slender body in place, causing him to forcefully stop halfway through a spin. Is there a mistake? Using the power of one hand to block the power of my whole body? Gotcha. At the same time that the escape plan failed, Huan An's second finger was also lightly broken, and another heart-wrenching pain was transmitted over. There are 3 fingers, you have 3 chances. If you can't break free before all your fingers are broken, I will twist your head. Long Do looked at the surprised assassin and spoke as if he was talking to trash. Monster, this guy is a monster. Inner technique. The next second, Huan's other arm slammed toward this side like a whip. His 3 fingers, which were in a triangular formation, pierced towards Long Do's face like the sharp tip of a whip. Huan's sacrificial blade was not slow, and it was almost to the point where human dynamic vision could barely cope with it. But even so, Ryudo still saw it very clearly, because his dynamic vision at this time had reached the limit of human vision. LV5 insight. When Ryudo learned that a powerful assassin had come to the Kamishiro Imperial Garden, he had already spent 5 billion renminbi to raise his insight to the maximum level on the way here. Previously, when Tomahawk was raided in Moscow, the Black Hand Alliance had seized a large amount of loot, including a large amount of cash and gold. After exchanging the loot for cash, Long Do had a few billion yuan in his account. He was filthy rich. At this time, with the superhuman level of LV5 insight, no matter how fast Huan's movements were, it was at best in Ryudo's eyes. Whoosh. As a result, the moment that whip-like hand pierced out, Long Do grabbed Huan's right hand and threw his body into the sky. With this throw, Huan only felt that his whole body lost balance and flew in the sky like a kite. The sacrificial blade that was originally aimed at the opponent's face had already missed. Crack. The moment he landed, another finger was quickly broken, and there were only 2 left. In other words, if Huan couldn't get rid of Ryudo's grasp in the next 2 operations, then he was dead. This was not a battle at all, but an execution. Ryudo knew this, and Huan also knew this. The former enjoyed it, while the latter was in extreme pain. This pain was not only from the physical pain, but the most terrible was the mental torture. Why? Why did I, the head of the Tenma group, the strongest ninja of the era, fall to the point of being executed in public by a 17 or 18-year-old brat? Damn it. There was no other way. Seeing that he still had 2 chances and the opponent was about to kill him, Huan had to make an extremely painful decision. Under the illumination of the surrounding flames, the strongest ninja suddenly flew up, and the sharp blade on his ninja boots popped out and stabbed towards Ryudo's temple. But no matter what, this kind of attack was a bit too casual. So Ryudo leaned sideways to avoid the kick, and after breaking the 4th finger, he sneered and said, "Fourth, one last time you? Huh?" Bang. Before Huan's upper body landed on the ground, a few small balls had already landed on the ground, and after a burst of explosion, a thick smoke rolled up. The smoke quickly spread in all directions, and then completely blocked Ryudo's vision, and he couldn't see Huan's actions in front of him. But is this useful? Your hand is still caught by me. Well, it's fine. Just as Ryudo grabbed Huan's wrist and was about to pull him back to beat him up, he suddenly felt his hand become lighter, as if the weight on the other side suddenly disappeared. Good guy, ruthless. After the smoke slowly dissipated, Ryudo looked at the arm in his hand that was cut off at the elbow and couldn't help but sigh from the bottom of his heart. Because he couldn't break free from Ryudo's grasp, Juan actually cut off his own arm, which was really ruthless. When the smoke dissipated, Juanen's figure had also completely disappeared in front of Ryudo's eyes. In the garden of the Kamishiro Imperial Garden, there were only 3 military helicopters burning, and the cat house not far away on the ground covered with rabbit ball. "Old man, are you okay?" At this time, Ryudo walked in front of Rabbit Ball and asked. At least on the surface, Rabbit Ball was indeed in a very bad condition. He was bleeding all over, his eyes were lifeless, and his breathing was weak, as if he was going to the gates of hell in the next moment. You're here." After seeing Ryudo, Rabbit Ball opened his eyes and said earnestly, "I can't go on anymore. The mission to protect Lady Ruihui and Lady Colored Glaze is... Oh." Before Rabbit Ball finished speaking, Ryudo had already taken out a pill from who knows where and stuffed it into his mouth, and then helped him swallow it. What did you feed me?" "A life-saving medicine. Whether you die or not, it's not up to you, it's up to me, understand?" After casually taking out a life-saving elixir that Wu Hong had eaten before and stuffing it into the rabbit ball, Long dove through the rabbit ball on the ground and leisurely ran inside to find Ruihui. As for Rabbit Ball, who was originally lying on the ground waiting for death, the moment the elixir entered his mouth, he felt a warm current flowing through his originally tattered body, and the intense pain immediately lessened by quite a bit. No way? What did he feed me? I don't have to die? What kind of person is this? A god? Looking at Ryudo's back, Rabbit Ball couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. Although he knew that Ryudo was no longer the little extreme Dao young master that he threatened a year ago, he didn't expect this person to become a living god that could even control his own life. Not long after, Ryudo also came to the emergency underground safe room of the Kamishiro Imperial Garden and saw Ruihui, who was sitting alone with a strange expression, as if she wasn't in a good mood. "Lady Ruihui, don't worry. The matter outside has been resolved, and there are no casualties." Ryudo sat beside Ruihui and said in a comforting tone, "Is that so? That's great." Ruihui slightly raised her eyebrows after hearing this and turned to look at Ryudo and sneered. "But what I want to know is my cute daughter okay? Her body is relatively weak, so you have to be careful." After being scolded by Lady Ruihui, Ryudo showed a somewhat awkward expression. After all, when the two were talking on the phone, Lady Ruihui heard Colored Glaze's angry words on the bed. She must already know what happened over there. His mother-in-law had overheard him having sex with her daughter in front of her, so the situation was somewhat awkward. So Ryudo could only smile bitterly. That Lady Ruihui, actually in fact, you two are in love with each other. And you are young and vigorous. It is reasonable for something to happen. I won't interfere too much, don't worry. Ruihui's tone was somewhat complicated, of course. Her mood was even more complicated. On one hand, Ruihui also hoped that her daughter could be happy, but on the other hand, she always felt a little uncomfortable in her heart when she thought of Ryudo and Colored Glaze being affectionate and sweet together. Ruihui didn't know who she was envious of. Forget it. Heaven's Eye has already made a move. Next is the decisive battle with Ayam. As the master of the Kamiyoshi clan, I shouldn't think about this anymore. After sending the embarrassed Ryudo away, Ruihui took a deep breath, looked up at the bright moon in the sky, and tried to calm her chaotic heart. Chapter 322. The night of the second day, inside the Heavenly Eye Group headquarters, unrestrained sky tower, a slim figure was walking slowly in the corridor covered with red carpets. Was it because yesterday's new product was too awesome? My waist is a bit sore. This beautiful woman, with a cold face, opened her rosy lips and yawned as she walked. At the same time, she stretched out her hand to support her slender waist, as if she had gone overboard last night. Just as she pushed open the door and entered a small conference room, there was already a bear-like man in a thick trench coat waiting for her in the conference room. He looked very sturdy, Director Teshima, long time no see. Seeing his old colleague push open the door and enter, the head of the Heavenly Eye Group's weapons department, Nicholas, raised his head and greeted her indifferently. Nicola, the last time I saw you was 2 years ago. The director of the Heavenly Eye Group Guard Department, Teshima Linhua, also nodded and sat on the chair on the right side of Nicola. Speaking of which, although there were 4 directors in this group, there was no friendship between the directors, and they rarely met each other. It was not strange to not see each other once in a year or 2. After all, the directors were usually busy with their work. Unless there was really a big event, there were few opportunities and occasions to appear together. Of course, the reverse of this sentence meant that when the ministers appeared together, it would really be accompanied by something big. After taking a seat, Lin Hua looked at the 2 empty seats next to the conference table, as well as the very special throne at the head of the table. He smiled and said, "Speaking of which, Lord Yongji actually called you back this time. She should be serious now. I don't dare to guess what Sama is thinking. I can only say, it's very likely." Just as Nicola and Lin Hua were chatting in the conference room, a middle-aged man with snake-like yellow pupils and a chicken nest on his head also pushed the door and walked in. "Yo, Yomi, I heard that you were poisoned by hell butterfly before. It's not easy to still be alive." When the old man appeared, Nicola said to him with a slightly mocking tone. It was hard to imagine that the relationship between the two was not particularly good. Humph. How could a mere anesthetic kill this old man? Hearing this, Huang Quan could not help but grit her teeth. She crossed her arms and sat on the stool. She sneered, "Compared to me, you should be more concerned about the situation of the new head of the intelligence department. He is still lying in the hospital room this morning." The new head of the intelligence department, isn't he the one who kicked heavy fire out not long ago? I think he's called Huanan. What happened to him? Lin Hua had naturally heard about the change in the head of the intelligence department of the Heavenly Eye Group. Before this, the head of the intelligence department had always been the leader of the Black Feather Ninja, Heavy Fire. However, all of a sudden, a young man called Huan and defeated Zhonghua in a one-on-one duel and seized the position of minister. According to Ling Hua's understanding of the situation, the new minister Huan and should be a very strong person. How could she suddenly enter the ward? Him? Humph, he went to the Kamishiro Imperial Garden to cause trouble last night and ended up losing more than 3 armed helicopters. He even broke his own arm and came back. He's a hopeless idiot. When this matter was mentioned, Nicholas couldn't help but scold him. After all, the 3 Apache armed helicopters were painstakingly built by their weapon department. As a result, the idiot Huan lost them all in one night. He was even better at messing with planes than the Indians. Isn't that right? Now we are still working with the technical staff of the weapon department to install a prosthetic hand for him. This guy has just taken office and hasn't done anything yet. Instead, he has brought us a lot of trouble. At this time, Huang Quan also complained with a tone full of disgust. Oh, so that's the case. That's really miserable. After hearing the words of the 2 ministers, Lin Hua also roughly understood the general situation. Anyway, it was the new head of the secret department who went to fight with someone and ended up destroying the equipment of the weapons department. He also needed the medical department to treat him and asked the 2 departments to work together to install a prosthetic hand for him. He was indeed a troublesome person. It was no wonder that Nikolai and Yomi didn't treat him well. Clang. But just as the 2 ministers were crazily complaining about the new colleague, the door of the conference room was opened again. The young minister with a bandaged hand and a pale face walked in with heavy steps. After walking in, Huan didn't say a word. He directly walked over and sat on the empty chair. He didn't even look at the 3 ministers of the other departments. It was as if they were air. Seeing his arrogant look, the hot-tempered Huang Quan couldn't help but ridicule him. You got yourself into trouble, and you still have the nerve to be so arrogant? Humph, my goal has been achieved. Rabitoshi is dead. I was just attacked by Ryudo Kiryu when I was retreating. What kind of trouble is that? Although from an objective point of view, Huanan was indeed severely beaten up last night, he couldn't say that he didn't complete his mission. After all, Rabbitoshi was indeed dead. Or he thought that Rabbitoshi was dead, but in fact, Rabbitoshi was just resting. Of course, Nikolai didn't agree with this statement. So he ridiculed him again. Sneak attack? I don't believe you can beat Tong Sheng Ryudu in a direct confrontation. I've seen his strength before. Believe it or not, I was just careless at that time. I didn't dodge. After being refuted by his colleague, Huanan's face turned red, but he still tried to defend himself. For a moment, he kept saying things like he doesn't talk about martial ethics, he didn't fight randomly, and he came prepared. The three of them just treated it as if they were listening to his nonsense, and the meeting room was filled with a cheerful atmosphere. However, just as Huanan, who had lost an arm, was trying her best to defend herself, a crisp sound of high heels could be heard. The lively atmosphere in the conference room came to an abrupt end, and it was as silent as a coffin shop. At this moment, the person who walked out from the other side of the conference room was the most beautiful woman in the world. Regardless of whether it was her appearance, figure, personal temperament, or taste in clothes, there was absolutely no one who would say anything bad about her. Of course, if someone dared to say anything bad about her, then that person would most likely be thrown to the dogs. After all, this was the most beautiful woman in the world, but also the most terrifying woman in the world. Even the 4 ministers of the Heavenly Eye Group were nervous when facing their boss. They were like a naughty child who met the teacher without doing homework. Nikolai, Lin Hua, Huang Quan, Huan Nun. Every single person sitting here could be considered a dragon or phoenix among men of this generation. Each of them had experienced countless major events, and their hands were stained with the blood of countless people. But even if the 4 of them were added together, the number of people they killed was definitely not as much as I am, and definitely not as much as the boss of the Heavenly Eye Group. Therefore, when Yongji strode with light steps, contentedly walked to her throne that was 1 level higher than the other 4 chairs and sat down, only then did she sweep her bewitching gaze across the 4 people one by one. It's really a pleasant thing to see the 4 of you gather together. When everyone was at a loss for what to do, Yongji said with a smile, and then gently clapped her hands. The 4 ministers were well aware of their boss's strange and unpredictable words and actions. At this time, Yomi, who was the most senior, took the lead and asked, "Lady Ayam, you called the 4 of us here. There must be something to announce." "That's right. We have been preparing for the previous plan for so long. Everyone has put in a lot of effort for this. It's time for us to test the results." Test the results? Could it be? When they heard Ayam's words, all the ministers widened their eyes and revealed excited expressions at the same time. All the core members of the Heavenly Eye Group had always known one thing, and that was that this group was carrying out a plan that could shake the world and definitely change history. And the name of this plan was Enai Hanan Temple. The chaos of Hanan Temple back then caused Hanan Temple to fall into a sea of fire. And this time, Enai Hanan Temple wanted to cause all places except Hanan Temple to fall into a sea of fire. Therefore, the core of this plan was to destroy Japan. To destroy a country with the power of a group, even if there was a group of capable people led by Ayam, it was definitely not an easy job. But fortunately, before this, the 4 major departments had put in enough effort for this plan. Why destroy Japan? Other than Ayam, no one knew, but this did not stop them from being excited about this plan. After all, there shouldn't be many normal people who could gather under Yongji's command, and destroying a country was something that would leave a mark in history, so it was natural that they would be attracted to it. It would be able to fully unleash the malice in their hearts. Lin Hua, has the Ministry of Internal Affairs been arranged properly? No problem. Enough pawns and substitutes have been placed. Now most of the people in the Metropolitan Police Department, the Cabinet, and the Parliament are our people. We can do whatever we want. Nikolai, is the weapon to be sent to the Middle East ready? It's ready. They can carry out a magnificent war there at any time to attract the attention of the world there. I guarantee that the United Nations will have a splitting headache. Yomi, has the production line for mass production of Hell Butterfly been completed? It can start. If necessary, it can be sent to the world's black market in large quantities. At that time, the cities of the entire Western world will be in chaos. Huanan, how's the preparation for the assassination of the leaders of the various countries? It was Chonghua who was in charge of this before, right? Lord Iam, this matter is still being arranged by Chonghua. He will participate in the plan as my best assistant. I can guarantee that when the time comes, none of the people who deserve to die will escape. Very good. Seeing that the ministers of the 4 major departments under her were fully prepared, Iam waved her hand and smiled. Now I hereby announce that the Ni Hanan Temple plan will officially start from today. Whoa, 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 whoa. With Iam Tenmu and the 4 ministers rallying arms, the Tenmu group, that had already started operating behind them, began to slowly float up like a huge submarine from the bottom of the bottomless strait to the surface of the water. And the moment they all surfaced, it was also the moment the world was enveloped in the flames of war. Chapter 323. Winter in Tokyo was a pure white winter. When it was December, a light snow seemed to have sprayed the surrounding houses and the ground with a thin layer of white film. It looked white and shiny, clean and beautiful. But Ryudo was not in a good mood because he was in trouble. 1 month after the attack on the Kamishiro Imperial Garden, Uni-senpai came to him with a very special message. Ryudo, come here, I have something to tell you. That morning, when Ryudo came to school to slack off, Yunyen mysteriously pulled him to a corner of the school. You have something to tell me? What's going on? Why are you being so secretive? At this time, the first class was about to start. The teaching building was secluded and there was no one around. Yunyen, on the other hand, had a strange look on her face as she pulled Long Daodu to an empty space behind the teaching building. Yunyen, if you have something to say, just say it. Do you want me to help you read again? Because he was busy this month, Ryudo hadn't read Yunyen's novel for a long time. No matter how he looked at it, it didn't look like a novel written by a normal person. Since the golden heron Iwasaki Yanasuk passed away a month ago, Rue Hui and Colored Glaze quickly used their family's relationship with Iwasaki Reiko to swallow up all of the golden heron's assets, and received an astronomical amount of money. After that, Rue Hui, who had money, connections, and influence, struck while the iron was hot. She quickly proposed a proposal to promote Gong Si to the new golden heron. She even hired the Black Hand Alliance to use countless dirty tricks to push Gong Si up. But it wasn't over yet. Although Kyoji became the golden heron of the Yatsuki, he still needed someone to fill the Dark Crow position. Therefore, Colored Glaze took a liking to Ryudo's other father-in-law, Saito Takahiro. As the head of the Saito Club, Takahiro had the qualifications to join the Yatsuki. It was just that Takahiro was too lazy to deal with those people, so he didn't join them. But even so, after Ryudo and Dunia's persuasion, Takahiro successfully entered the Yatsuki and successfully took another Dark Crow position. After all this, the Yatsuki could be said to have been infiltrated by Ryudo's forces. Rue Hui, Kyoji, and Takahiro all held important positions in the Yatsuki, and they were constantly trying to recruit other forces. A month later, the Black Hand Alliance, Kamiyoshi Clan, Tsukudra Group, and Saito Club began to fully display the power of the Iron Four Corners. Black Hand Alliance, Kamiyoshi Clan, Tsukudra Group, and Saito Club began to fully display the power of the Black Hand Alliance, Kamiyoshi Clan, Tsukudra Group, and Saito Club. In this case, Ryudo's side naturally made a lot of money, and there were a lot of things to worry about. Recently, every day was happy, until Yunyen suddenly came to the door. At this time, why was Yunyen so nervous to find Ryudo? Seeing that there was no one around, Yunyen boldly said, what I'm going to say next, don't be afraid. Afraid? Ryudo laughed and said, you really know how to joke. Who doesn't know that I, Ryudo Kiryu, am full of courage? There shouldn't be many things in this world that can make me afraid. The reason why Ryudo said this was not to brag, because now his courage had reached the level of LV5 courage, extreme Superman, and he really wouldn't be afraid of certain things. However, not being afraid didn't mean that he wouldn't be shocked. Then I'll say it? Say it, don't worry. Even if the sky falls, I'll help you. I'm pregnant. What? The moment he heard those words, Long Do was stunned for a moment. Then he suddenly leaped into the air and did a 720-degree spin in the air. After landing from a height of 3 meters, he quickly reached out and hugged Yunyan's shoulder and asked nervously, You. What did you say? Are you really pregnant? Are you sure? The reason why Ryudo was so surprised was not unreasonable. After all, although he had been having sex with Yunyan since a month ago, they had been very honest and took protective measures every time. How could she suddenly be pregnant? Speaking of which, the only time Ryudo didn't take protective measures was the night in Moscow with Dunya. In the end, Dunya seemed to be fine, but Yunyan, who had been very safe, was pregnant? Wasn't this too bizarre? If it weren't for the fact that Ryudo had always believed in Yunyan's words, he would even suspect that he had been cheated on and that this child was not his. But when it came to why she was pregnant, Yunyan said in an awkward tone, I've already gone to the hospital for a checkup, and it's confirmed that I'm pregnant. Speaking of which, this matter is actually related to Sister Linhana. Linhana Tajima? What does it have to do with that girl? Can she help me get you pregnant? Something like that. Actually, after I found out that I was pregnant last night, I also asked Sister Linhana. And then she said, what did she say? She said that when she met us in Paris and went into the room with us, she secretly used a needle to pierce a hole in the box of toys we bought. That's why it's like this. Hand. Island. Lin. Hua. Is there something wrong with your brain? Hearing this, Ryudo couldn't help but reach out and cover his head. He secretly cursed that perverted woman 100 times in his heart. Psycho, other than psycho, Ryudo really didn't know how to describe Linhana. Why did she want to stab someone else's condom with a needle? Did she want to have a nephew so badly? Great, that perverted Linhana really succeeded. Yunyan was really pregnant. But now, no matter who it was meaningless to blame anyone. Both of them had to face reality. Some time ago, Yunyan had just celebrated her 18th birthday. In a few months, she would graduate from this Dory No. 1 high school and step into society to start on her own path as a writer. But this unexpected pregnancy suddenly messed up Yunyan's life steps. Before she could have the identity of a writer, she already had the new identity of a mother-to-be. No, I'm a man. At this time, I have to stand up. After taking a deep breath, Ryudo reached out and hugged Yunyan into his arms. He comforted her softly. If you're pregnant, then so be it. Let's find a time to get the marriage certificate and have a wedding ceremony. It can be considered as an explanation to your parents. In Ryudo's view, since he did such a thing to someone else's daughter, then as a man, he must be responsible. There was no need to talk about getting the marriage certificate. He also had to have a grand wedding ceremony to let the woman feel that her 10 months of suffering was worth it. He also had to take care of her for the rest of her life. This was the responsibility of a man. But when he thought of the murderous expression on his father-in-law's face after this matter was exposed, Ryudo couldn't help but sigh. And what made him sigh even more was, at this time, Yunyan, who was leaning in Ryudo's arms, raised her head and said with a worried tone, If we get married, what about colored glaze and Dunya? That's right, compared to his father-in-law, who was difficult to appease, Ryudo needed to appease colored glaze and Dunya more. In fact, before this, Ryudo had already thought of a solution for himself and his 3 harem. That was to change nationality and run to Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, and other countries that allowed polygamy to get married. After all, marriage was the most important thing in a woman's life. They all hoped to have an unforgettable wedding. They definitely didn't want to follow their husband without any status. So Ryudo had already decided to take the three women out of this country to get married abroad after settling Iam's matter. Unfortunately, it seemed like it was too late now. Recently, there were many things happening. According to Colored Glaze's information, the Heavenly Eye Group's actions were becoming more and more obvious. They didn't give Ryudo time to bring them out to change nationality and have a wedding ceremony. However, Union's stomach was about to get bigger. What should I do? Forget it. I have to let them know anyway. It's better to discuss it with Colored Glaze and Dunya. Based on the idea that everyone had the right to know, Ryudo planned to meet the two women at his house in the evening. He planned to have a small family meeting to settle this matter openly. But at this moment, Yunyen took the initiative to say, "Let me tell them. After all, this is the trouble created by Sister Linhua. It's not your fault." What if the two of them get angry? Seeing that I'm pregnant, even if they get angry, they probably won't do anything to me. Speaking of this, Yunyen confidently stuck out her belly that didn't have any ups and downs. Although there was a new life in it, at least from the outside, it was completely impossible to tell. Seeing that Yunyen was so insistent, Ryudo also agreed to let her take the initiative to inform the two of this happy event. The location was at the lunch meeting at noon. During this period, Ryudo and Colored Glaze often didn't come to school because of their busy work. However, it just so happened that they didn't have anything to do these 2 days, so Colored Glaze also obediently stayed in school at this time. Of course, even so, Colored Glaze definitely didn't expect that this lunch meeting at noon, where Ryudo was absent, would have such a big issue. Both of you, because of some things, accidentally got pregnant. I'm very sorry. Just when Yunyen lowered her head to Colored Glaze and Dunya very apologetically, the two women were stunned at the same time. Then, their attitude was completely different from what Yunyen had thought before. Pregnant. Really? That's amazing. The first to react was Dunya. She hurriedly ran to Yunyen's side and leaned her little head on Yunyen's belly, as if she wanted to listen to the fetal movement in the belly. Are you an idiot? How can a 1-month-old baby have fetal movement? After seeing Dunya's reaction, Colored Glaze first ridiculed her, then calmly congratulated Yunyen. Congratulations, I hope the child can be born healthy. Although her reaction was quite different from Dunya's, from Colored Glaze's tone and attitude, she obviously wasn't dissatisfied with Yunyen's pregnancy. This completely exceeded Yunyen's expectations. Chapter 324. What's going on? Aren't the two of them always fighting to be the first in all aspects, unwilling to fall behind others? Why did they react so gently to my cheating behavior? In the beginning, Yunyen thought that Colored Glaze and Dunya would have some complaints when they found out that she was pregnant. At the very least, it was inevitable that they would complain a little. But she didn't expect that the two of them would have such an attitude, as if they weren't jealous at all. What? You don't think I'm jealous of you, do you? As if sensing Yunyen's surprise, Colored Glaze couldn't help but laugh. Only Dunya would do this kind of thing. I'm not that narrow-minded. Huh? What the hell? Is it okay to shoot at me? Dunya obviously didn't like to hear this, so she raised her head from Yunyen's stomach and replied in a disdainful tone, "The person who would do this kind of thing is obviously you, a woman with a heart as small as a sesame seed." Heart as small as a sesame seed? You actually have the face to say such things? 2 weeks ago, I borrowed Ryudo from you for a while, and you pissed me off for 3 days. You haven't done this kind of thing before? Didn't I take your favorite dish at the dinner party a month ago, and you were all kinds of sarcastic behind my back? Bringing up old scores, right? 3 months ago, percent at. Yen asterisk at hashtag at. Hashtag yen hashtag asterisk. You're the one bringing up old scores. Clearly 6 months ago. Hashtag at. Hashtag yen at hashtag asterisk percent. 9 months ago. You xxxxx. 1 year ago. You xxxxx. Seeing the two sisters quarrel in front of her again, Yunyen forced herself not to say, "Stop quarreling. I think the two of you are really narrow-minded." But she also understood why the two of them didn't hold a grudge against her for secretly getting pregnant. The reason was very simple because the one who was pregnant this time was Yunyen, and not Colored Glaze or Dunya. So they weren't jealous. After all, Yunyen was very popular, and everyone liked her. And now, in Ryudo's harem group of 3, Colored Glaze and Dunya were the type that naturally clashed. One was a smart Japanese beauty, while the other was a martial artist. One was an intelligent Japanese beauty, while the other was a martial artist. Even the things they liked to eat were different. Colored Glaze liked to eat fish, shrimp, crab, and other seafood, while Dunya liked to eat pancakes, sour cream, and barbecue, and both of them disdainful of each other's recipes. Fish, shrimp, crab? So disgusting, how could they eat it? Bye. Dunya pancakes with pancakes? Barbecue? Isn't that too? Bye. Colored Glaze in this kind of situation. The two of them had conflicts everywhere, but fortunately, Yunyen was in the middle to act as a buffer, so they could barely get by. Speaking of which, Yunyen was the kind of person who didn't have any special strengths, and didn't have any special preferences. To put it bluntly, she wasn't good at anything, and only had the charm of a witch. But it was also this kind of Yunyen that could be the all-purpose lubricant in a team, making everyone like her. Even when she secretly got pregnant, Colored Glaze and Dunya sincerely congratulated her. On the other hand, if either Colored Glaze or Dunya got pregnant first, then the other would definitely flip the table in anger. Then it would become a civil war. But although the pregnancy didn't cause any problems, the two of them always quarreling was really a little troublesome. Seeing Colored Glaze and Dunya start to quarrel again, Yunyen, who was sitting at lunch, couldn't help but sigh. Speaking of which, is there any way to improve their relationship? Unknowingly, Yunyen started to think about this question in her mind. After all, they were going to live together as a family of 4. If 2 of them quarreled every day, then it was a kind of family misfortune, and they definitely wouldn't be happy every day. What should I do? Right. Why don't I take this opportunity to have a party at Ryudo's place? Everyone can happily quarrel for a night. And if we can relieve some of the tension, their relationship should improve a lot. Thinking of this, Yunyen smiled and said to the two of them, Stop. Do you want to have a party at Ryudo's place tonight to celebrate the birth of my son? Birth of your son? Isn't your son still in your stomach? You don't seem to be able to describe it as a birth of your son. Just as Yunyen finished speaking, Colored Glaze and Dunya ridiculed at the same time, and then fiercely glared at each other. You two. If only you could have such tacit understanding. After secretly sighing, Yunyen convinced the two of them to attend the party tonight, and she told this news to Ryudo, who was a little troubled because he suddenly became a father. A party in my room? To improve the relationship between Colored Glaze and Dunya's relationship? This seems to be possible. Ryudo nodded at this time, and in his mind, he also remembered the glorious daily quarrels between Colored Glaze and Dunya, the beautiful sisters. However, if they were going to have a gathering, then it would be better to prepare some snacks, drinks, and alcohol. Although Senior Yunyen was currently pregnant and could not drink alcohol, those two fellows were still able to drink. As the saying goes, if you drink too much, you'll play with money. If you want to quickly improve the relationship, 3 to 5 glasses of alcohol and a few heartfelt words from the drunken stupor would definitely have a good positive effect. I've decided to get some alcohol, and tonight I'll get Colored Glaze and Dunya drunk together, and let them speak the truth after drinking, and become good brothers after drinking. At the thought of this, Longdo immediately arranged for his assistant, Ming Hai, to buy the necessary supplies for the party. In particular, the drinks had to be sufficient, and they had to be the kind that ladies could drink. Then, they waited for the night to come. Just like this, when night fell, a very festive scene appeared in Ryudo's room. Colored Glaze, Yunyen, and Dunya, the 3 girls, very punctually came together to Ryudo's room, and at this time, a large table was placed in the middle of the room, and the table was filled with all kinds of snacks, drinks, party games, and so on, a very standard party scene. Whoa, this situation looks quite fresh. Seeing the 3 girls come together to his bedroom, Ryudo, who had never seen this scene before, couldn't help but nod slightly, and the corner of his mouth raised into an excited arc. During this period of time, whether it was Colored Glaze, Yunyan, or Dunya, they had all been on the bed in this bedroom, cough cough, resting. But even so, it was the first time that the three of them appeared here together. Especially when Ryudo saw the big bed next to the table, and then looked at the three figures who had slept on the bed one after another. An evil thought emerged in his mind. Speaking of which, my bed is also quite big if the three of them can sleep together. Hee. Creak. But just when Ryudo was thinking of something like sleeping together, accompanied by a creaking sound, Dunya suddenly jumped toward the bed. Oh, I'm so tired. This bed is still the most comfortable to lie on, hee. After taking off her shoes, Dunya, who was wearing a gothic dress and lace stockings, curled up on Ryudo's bed, and raised her small feet and rolled on the bed while hugging the pillow, as if she was occupying her territory. Seeing Dunya occupying the bed she slept on, Colored Glaze on the side couldn't help but quickly stop her. Come down, it's rude. Hey, you're not the owner here. What right do you have to say that I'm rude? You. Colored Glaze, who was choked by Dunya, was naturally unconvinced. So she quickly took off her shoes and jumped onto the bed, occupying the other half of the bed that the petite body couldn't occupy. Ah, you're a smart one. Shameless. Who's learning from you? When I was lying on this bed, who knows where you were playing with mud? So what if you came early? At least you didn't come late. Chatter, crackle, crackle. Seeing these two girls quarreling over his bed, Ryudo could only use a helpless tone to say to them, "Can you two stop arguing? Look at Yunya and she. Wait. I have a share of this bed too. You can't exclude me." Before Ryudo could finish his words, Yunyan, who was next to him, quickly threw off her shoes and rushed to the bed in a loose dress, as if she was afraid that she wouldn't have a place to lie down if she was late. Are you kidding me? Yunyan is here too? And these guys is fighting for territory that fun. Seeing the three girls pushing and fighting on the bed, Ryudo didn't know whether to laugh or cry at first, but not long after. His eyes were fixed on them. Well, how should I put it? After going through the initial chaotic battle and entering the stage of close combat, the current situation on the bed was really pleasing to the eye. Colored Glaze, Yunyan, and Dunya were already absolute beauties. Now that they were lying, and sitting together on the bed, it was inevitable that one would see their dresses flipped up and their slender legs entwined with each other. Especially those three pairs of beautiful legs. It was really amazing, needle-free, needle-free, needle-free. Among the three girls, Yunyan was the tallest. Her legs were also the longest, the fleshiest, the most voluptuous, and the best to touch. At this time, those voluptuous legs were wrapped in skin-tight nude stockings, rubbing on the bed, quilt, and pillow, easily attracting the attention of others. Of course, in terms of attracting attention, Colored Glaze and Dunya were not far behind. Although these two's legs weren't as voluptuous as Yunyan's, they each had their own unique characteristics. The former's advantage was in its boniness, while the latter's advantage was in its petite size. Colored Glaze's legs were in between the other two, but because of her slender figure, those straight and slender legs looked very bony. Especially when paired with the black stockings that she often wore, it completely outlined the perfect shape of her legs, making people unable to help but want to hold her in their arms and caress her. Dunya's legs were a little short, but because her body was petite, her legs that looked short were especially cute. Paired with the gothic white lace stockings that she wore today, it brought out her petite and cute side to the extreme, making people want to put them in their mouth and taste them. Speaking of which, Ryudo had seen the legs of the three beauties and played with them from various angles. But he had never seen such a feeling of three flowers at one's prominence, three elements in one, and three parts of the world. Three different pairs of beautiful legs, respectively wearing nude, black, and white stockings, were even entangled and rubbing against each other on the bed. That beautiful scene really made Longdo almost unable to resist the urge to directly pounce on them and have a good time with them. But he couldn't. If Ryudo really pounced on them now, there was a high chance that he would be beaten up by both Colored Glaze and Dunya. So he had to be patient and wait for the right time to make his move. You're tuning in to the Echo Reads YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.